According to Plato, primarily in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Atlantis was a powerful island civilization located beyond the Pillars of Hercules. This is the modern-day Strait of Gibraltar. It divides the Mediterranean from the Atlantic. The Atlanteans were descendants of Poseidon and initially were a virtuous society governed by wise rulers who followed divine principles. Over time, the Atlanteans became increasingly materialistic and morally corrupt. They developed significant military power and began expanding their territory through conquest. They launched a massive military campaign against Athens and other Mediterranean civilizations. Athens at the time was a noble and disciplined society. Despite being significantly smaller than Atlantis, the Athenians mounted a heroic defense. Plato portrays the Athenians as a virtuous, disciplined society that successfully repelled the Atlantean invasion. Shortly after this conflict, according to Plato's account, both Atlantis and Athens were struck by a catastrophic natural disaster. Atlantis was said to have been swallowed by the ocean in a single day and night, completely disappearing beneath the waves. This presentation will show, using data from the books you see here, that the Atlantis narrative preserves true historical events. There are 30 chronological points in the story that date the Atlantean War and destruction. The true date of Atlantis narrative was known 2,000 years ago. Popular authors and platforms are networked together in an effort to keep you from knowing the truth about this destruction date. True Atlantis researchers are suppressed and unmentioned by this network. The bibliographies of these deceitful authors prove they have read the books and know the true data, but they cherry-pick what they inform the public. The Platonic Atlantis narrative remained unchanged for 2,200 years until a massive amount of invented material was introduced into the Atlantis story by mystics in the 1800s. After 4 years of email and public requests for these men to defend their research and public claims about Atlantis, no one has wanted to put their claims up to public scrutiny in an archaics debate. Every one of them have been made aware of the callouts by many different species of communication. In this presentation, I will show who they are and who protects them. Welcome to the unbreakable data set that completely ends the debate over Atlantis dating. Every one of these men shown in this presentation are welcome to either debate the matter or offer their public critiques, for which I will give answer. I have said many times, in 2025, we are in a paradigm war, and in the matter of Atlantis, Archaix has won by default. Hello, hello. Such an intriguing situation. My first book published in 2006, followed in 2009, 2011, 2013, 2017, several books published, 2019. You guys know, 2021, 2024, my publisher's busy. He still has more manuscripts to release. And yet, not once has Atlantis ever been a data point for me. My research has gone elsewhere. I'm not even interested in the Platonic dialogues. I don't care. I don't really even have a dog in this fight. But the problem is that I am a chronologist. And this is one of the most grievous chronological errors in the history of publishing. And what I'm going to show you in this video is irrefutable. I fear no one's critical analysis of this data set. No one. 4 years of call outs has proven to me that you guys know, I haven't been secret about it. I have been providing the public PDFs with all the data as I find it. So if they wanted to debate, they can come armed. Still nothing. So there's more going on here than just a simple matter of opinion. I'm not bringing opinions to the table. A lot of people have been triggered. My emails have been very interesting. Some of the comments on Twitter as well. But it doesn't matter to me. There's no opining in this. A data set is a data set. It's as simple as that. It can be verified. You can go through it. You can either dismiss it or you can accept the information for what it is. But accepting the information I'm dropping in this video completely collapses this whole narrative network that for some reason is just dead set on promoting an idea that cannot be defended. Graham Hancock won't defend it. Randall Carlson won't defend it. Jimmy Corsetti won't defend it. And yet there are common denominators between these men and others. Many people that I showed on the thumbnail, they're not guilty of outward deception. They're mainly guilty of following the deception and not really even understanding what they were citing and the implications. So this is what we're going to get into. And what's really scary is when you look at all the videos on Atlantis that Patrick Ben-David, a huge platform, Patrick Ben-David has interviewed Graham Hancock and several others, all promoting the Atlantis narrative. But so is Andrew Schultz. So is Joe Rogan. So has Lex Friedman. There are common threads and common denominators between all four of these men. I shouldn't have to tell it to you. Yeah, you haven't been listening to Archaix very long if you don't know what that common thread is. But all four of these men share something in common. And I'm not just talking about their platforms, the fact that they have them. But I don't understand why do they even have a dog in this fight? Why protect the very individuals who have got on your channels and your platforms and promoted ideas to your communities and yet won't defend the integrity of their research when called out by somebody who is qualified? The issue isn't Graham Hancock, and it's not Randall Carlson, Jimmy Corsetti, this new little upstart, this little smurf that popped out of nowhere, Michael Button, been on YouTube 11 months. He's already on Joe Rogan. And now he's already doing fundraisers, trying to get people on YouTube to send him money. That's his last post. Yeah, where are they getting these people? He's like a British version of Jimmy Upsetti. They even look identical. So there's more going on here than meets the eye. This isn't a matter of opinion. It's really scary when you watch all these Atlantis videos and you see that Graham Hancock is not only heavily promoted but protected by these men. If I was Patrick Ben-David, but so many of you guys have contacted his people, I would be like, damn, Mr. Hancock, what are you going to do about this Jason of Archaix guy? Because he's really affecting the field. He's really decimating your research. And he's doing a really good job at it. And he has a very intelligent community. And they evidently can separate fact from fiction because they're not being hoodwinked. Do you want to answer to this guy? Would you like to come on my platform again? And we'll invite Jason and you guys can hash this out? That's never happened. Patrick Ben-David's not interested in the truth. Andrew Schultz, also huge platform, lets these guys tell these lies, but doesn't even give them an opportunity to defend them. So Andrew Schultz too is interested in the psyop. Lex Friedman, same thing. You have a huge platform. Do you have any idea how many millions of people would watch somebody debate Graham Hancock and you're not even interested? What's the real agenda here? Joe Rogan, same thing. Joe Rogan, I mean, if you want to know, there's a whole list of shills that have been on Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's good at that. Almost everybody I've named has been on Joe Rogan. So I have no interest in being on Joe Rogan. unless I'm debating somebody who has been on Joe Rogan. That's a whole different fundamental there. But what I'm saying is there's a lot more going on here than just a battle of opinions. And this video was necessary to show you we're not talking about opinions. We are dealing in hardcore facts. And those facts are being systematically ignored and suppressed. So I have to wonder, what's in it for Lex Fridman? What's in it for Joe Rogan? What's in it for Andrew Schultz? What's in it for Patrick Ben-David? You've given all these men platforms, but you won't even ask them to come back to defend themselves against somebody who is literally dismantling their entire house? Because that's what I'm doing. And I'm not done. This video was the first domino. We have all these books by all these researchers who have been putting out absolute total academic crap, using the Atlantis 9600 BC deal as a stepping stone, a piece of data that supports their bogus theories. It is you already know Graham Hancock. He's like Alpha Prime right here, Grifter. I even have a video on YouTube called Fingerprints of the Grift, where I go through this book and show you where the man has made some critical mistakes. Yeah, guys, you already know I'm extremely well read. These books, they're all full of shit. And any of these authors are more than welcome to come on my channel and defend the integrity of this horse shit that we have. And it doesn't matter if they do or not, because you're going to see the videos right here on Archaix where I totally dismantle all that. We're going into archaeoastronomy. We're going into zodiacal dating. We're going into Civilization X. All this crap, they're all citing this Atlantis 9,600 years BC. You know these authors. They all use Graham Hancock's dating and all that to support their own bogus theories. When you tell a lie and you don't let anybody tell everyone around them that it's a lie, you're able to attach other lies to it. Yeah. Toppling the 9,600 year BC Atlantis dating starts toppling all these other theories as well. Oh yeah, we're not done. There's a bunch of them. Got a bunch of these books. Yeah, this is not lightly said. This is not lightly said. These guys are defending an empire, and it is an empire built on deception. A completely pseudo-historical falsified version of reality that covers up the true chronology of the world. That's the dog I have in this fight, because I am a chronologist and I will defend that to a T. Again, this guy here, David Edward, man, he's got nothing original. He brings nothing original to the table, this guy here. All he's really doing is parroting Jimmy Corsetti's research, which is all garbage. Jimmy Corsetti is another one who won't defend himself. The whole Rishat structure crap is just you guys know. You've seen my videos on Jimmy Upsetti. He's a good singer though. He's got 2 good songs on my channel. So when you go through the Atlantis videos on YouTube, we have like a communist agenda unfolding. It's very interesting, because you start hearing the rote patterning. When Graham Hancock is always describing the destruction of Atlantis, it's always the same words, almost the same syntax, said in the same way, over and over and over and over and over. I showed this on my channel before. Randall Carlson's the same way. Jimmy Corsetti is the same way. And there are times, and these guys know that they're not telling you the truth. Jimmy Corsetti is the weakest link. And what I mean is when he's telling a bald-faced lie, he breaks out into a grin. Oh, you can see it in all his videos. Anytime he's asked a question and he says a deliberate lie, he just breaks out into a grin. It's like he can't stop himself from grinning as he says it. Yeah, I'm going to show you. So good. We're going to get this fun out the way before we get deep off into this data set. And this data set is unlike any of them that I've ever provided. This one here, shoot, you guys can take the data set and write books off this. Every book cited in this data set, I'll give you the page numbers, authors, titles. but you saw them in the intro to this video. The intro to this video showed all the books I'm citing. Now, like I said, some of the people I showed on the deal are nowhere near as guilty as the main ones I'm talking about. Main ones I'm talking about, Graham Hancock. Yeah, he's alpha deceiver. Yeah, his beta sidekick is Randall Carlson. Randall Carlson, then Jimmy Corsetti, and they are now grooming Michael Button to pick up the mantle because he's 100% touting nothing but totally unoriginal. It is all the same stuff we've been hearing since the 90s and the thousands. Michael Button, on the new guy on YouTube, been here a year now, already on Joe Rogan. He's already done videos with Graham Hancock. He's being groomed as Graham Hancock's replacement. Graham Hancock's getting old. So he's being groomed to take over. He's very well spoken. He has professional grade YouTube channel. It is when you go through his videos, like, damn, man, this is very expensive. Well, what he's got going on, to me, it all reeks of intelligence agency, all the way from Patrick Ben-David, Andrew Schultz, Lex Friedman, Joe Rogan, and they're basically basically told who they can have as a guest and what topics are acceptable. Because if they had a fiduciary plan, if they had the idea of making money, there's nothing in podcast history right here in the United States that would draw more attention than Jason of Archaix going on a large platform and debating a whole panel of these people that I'm accusing of grifting and lying and being deceptive. Yeah, that would make world news. People all over would listen to it just out of general interest, just to see if I could take them all on at the same time. I'm telling you I can. So if you have the power to set that up, do so. Yeah, I don't even need to cite any sources. I got it all right here. I said I'll take them all on at the same time in a debate, because truth is so easy to defend. You only have to argue when you're dealing in deception and lies. Franz Boas said it best, 1888. Record enough facts and the truth will fall like ripe fruit. So I'm going to introduce you guys to authors and books about real Atlantis researchers who are suppressed. And I'm going to show you 100% verifiable data that the accurate information about what I'm revealing is already in Graham Hancock's bibliographies. And yet he cherry picks what they say to produce a 9,600 year Atlantis dating instead of where it's supposed to be in the historical record in the 13th century BC. Graham Hancock has read these ancient authors. If he hasn't, his bibliography is a lie, because he cites the very ancient authors that corrected all this information. And that is particularly damning. Somebody in the chat says you should make an Archaix magazine with a monthly subscription. I was published in Paranoia magazine years ago, and my publisher attempted to get me published in Nexus magazine, and then I reached out to Nexus again, and then other people reached out to Nexus on my behalf in the past. And for some reason, I've been stonewalled each time from Nexus, so I've totally lost interest in magazines and all that stuff. So you know what? It was crazy and coincidental is last night. Yeah, I forgot what his name is. He's the editor of Nexus magazine. I don't remember, but he popped up. He's probably listening now. He popped up on my X feed and asked me, so I can tell he doesn't really follow me. He asked me, "Have you attempted to contact Graham Hancock or Randall Carlson or any of these people?" I almost got really indignant and just you guys know me. I'll fly off on a comment if I think you're trolling me. Yeah, so I can tell he hasn't really been paying attention, because that's all we've been doing is calling people out publicly and then posting the emails, and so you guys can see them. Yeah, he contacted me through X in the comments section, and I was polite to him, although initially my initial reaction was to get real fly. But yeah, I'm just not interested in my publisher's cool. I'm not interested in anybody else anymore. I don't trust anybody anymore. I'm jaded, man. The whole world's captured operation. So before I show you this next clip, you have to understand this is all they got. This is how embarrassing. What I'm about to show you is all they got compared to the massive amount of data in this data set I'm about to drop on you. When it comes to dating Atlantis at 9,600 BC, it is absolutely embarrassing how much they got. And yet, all the major platforms, it's acceptable. Like I said, Friedman, Schultz, Ben David, and Joe Rogan. These are the four big ones, and they've had all these guys as guests. So it's perfectly acceptable that this is what is supposed to prove to the community that this dating is correct. They've got nothing else. Here's how embarrassing this is.
Universe intervened and struck Atlantis down. So Solon said to the priests, okay, when did this happen? And they said, quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. That's in 600 BC. Do the math. That's a date in our calendar. That's 9,600 BC. That's 11,600 years ago.
I should mention about that particular date, 11,600.
Well, it's incredibly important. It's an incredibly important day because the Younger Dryas begins 12,800 years ago with a cataclysm, with a puzzling, mysterious rise in sea level at the same point, 1,000 years of freezing temperatures, mass extinctions of animal species all over the world, and then 11,600 years ago, global temperature shoots up. The last of the ice caps collapse into the sea. Sea level rises enormously. That is the date that work starts at Göbekli Tepe, and it's a point I've made many times, but it's really worth making because archaeologists roll their eyes every time you say the word Atlantis. But that is precisely the date that Plato, which is the earliest surviving reference to Atlantis, that's precisely the date he gives for the destruction of Atlantis. And as we look into it further, we find something else, that Plato puts a date on the destruction of Atlantis. He says Atlantis was submerged beneath the waves in a huge global cataclysm 9,000 years before the time of Solon. That gives us an absolute date for this. Then Solon asks, when did this happen? And the priests say, they're very relaxed about it. They say, 9,000 years ago. So immediately we have a date that we can put to our calendar. 600 BC, he makes the visit. 9,000 years before that, that's 9,600 BC. Give or take 23 years, that is 11,600 years ago. That's when Göbekli Tepe is built. That's when Meltwater Pulse 1b begins to flood the world oceans. And again, my critics will niggle away at the edges of this and say, well, Meltwater Pulse 1b unfolded over 300 or 400 years. If you average it out, it wasn't that much in any one year. But who says it happened at average rates? Who says there wasn't a big rise and then a smaller rise? Yeah. These things are very annoying. So Solon said to the priests, okay, when did this happen? And they said, quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. Quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. 9,000 years ago. Plato repeatedly states that it is a true story. And as we look into it further, we find something else, that Plato puts a date on the destruction of Atlantis. He says Atlantis was submerged beneath the waves in a huge global cataclysm 9,000 years before the time of Solon. And Solon asked those Egyptian priests, when did this happen? And they said, 9,000 years ago. Well, do the math. That's in 600 BC. That's 9,000 years before 600 BC. We call that 9,600 BC. That's 11,600 years ago. That's exactly the date of the end of the Younger Dryas, and it's exactly the date of what is called Meltwater Pulse 1b, one of the biggest single rises overnight in sea level that ever occurred. So if Plato made it up, it's really weird that he picked a date that is precisely a date that coincides with the latest geological evidence on cataclysmic sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age. Plato is the earliest surviving reference we have to this great lost civilization of prehistory that he referred to as Atlantis. The source, the earliest surviving source for the tradition of Atlantis, is the highly respected figure of Plato. And he passes it down to us in dialogues called the Timaeus and the Critias.
The primary role of Atlantis in this story is like a foil for this antediluvian super ancient Athens that they claim coexisted at the same time. So if I'm remembering this right, I think it's like 9,000 years pre-Plato. They're
9,000 years pre-Solon.
Pre-Solon. So 9,000 years pre-Solon. So he's like another 100 or 200 years before.
Yeah, he's about 600 BC was his journey to Egypt.
So so this is just another thing that's very easy to be like, come on, there was no ancient pre-Diluvian Athens, and the story, and I guess now it kind of makes sense to get into some of just a little bit of the story, is that Atlantis is like this massive, very powerful island nation that's like invading Europe, right? And then they fight the Atlanteans, and the Atlanteans kind of fight them back. And then they all get swallowed up by some kind of huge cataclysm, right? Like they all get swallowed up by an earthquake.
Yeah, and that's something that's typically overlooked, is that I call them the proto-Athenians, they're destroyed. The armies, they were destroyed in what basically, using his terminology, sounds like an extreme catastrophic erosional event. Which would imply what's usually the trigger of erosional events is extreme pluviation or rainfall.
Yeah,
and the history of human civilization.
Okay, we're going to get back to this clip. First of all, I'm going to address a few things. In the beginning of the clip, you saw Hancock, and that's all he's got is 9,000 years of Plato. So we're going to address that 9,000 years. We're going to show you he was never told 9,000 years. Not in the Greek understanding of that term, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter. What's really interesting is that Graham Hancock it's a communist technique. It's to say something over and over and over, but in different ways. And what you're saying is untrue, but you say it and bridge it to things that could be true. And this is a really deceptive technique, and it works. It convinces people that there may have been something called meltwater pulse 1b isn't even attached to the Atlantis narrative. That there's an ice age isn't attached to the Atlantis narrative. That there may have been a younger Dryas impact, 12,000 years ago. It's not connected to the Atlantis narrative at all. I'm going to prove that in this video. But by every time the public associates Atlantis with you saying things about the Ice Age, Meltwater Pulse 1b, and the Younger Dryas impact, it becomes associative. Everybody starts connecting. And this is where a lot of YouTubers have fallen prey. They're not really guilty of deception. They're guilty of falling for it and then republishing it and putting it out there for their own communities. That anything happened 12,000 years ago isn't the issue here. So when you're debating Atlantis theory, never get caught up on if there was an ice age or not. Is the Younger Dryas really real? Well, which of the 59 different theories of ice age do you subscribe to? All this BS? No, when you're dealing with Atlantis, you stick with the facts. Graham Hancock's not going to let you do that. He's going to switch everything over to the guided narrative that already comes preloaded with all kinds of things that are untrue and have nothing to do with Atlantis, but they're going to bog you down in the details. Yeah, if I debate any of these guys, there's no way I'm going to let them bridge the Ice Age to the Atlantis narrative. Yeah, I'm going to spit facts one after another. I'm just not going to let it happen. But this is his narrative. It's always Atlantis, Ice Age, Younger Dryas, Meltwater Pulse 1b. It is repetitive. It is hypnotic. It is the only thing he ever says in every single interview. Don't believe me? Start Googling Hancock deals and listen to every single video he does. Anytime the subject of Atlantis comes up, he's already got his pre whatever it is, a CIA script or whatever. I don't know. That's what he's got. So the next thing I want to draw to your attention was the Randall Carlson deal. Did you hear what the guy said? He told the truth. Randall Carlson was probably taken aback, but he kept his poker face and he just mowed over it and didn't entertain the guy at all. And the guy let it go. Did you catch it? I want to see in the chat if anybody caught it. Because the guy knows Athens didn't possibly exist 9,000 years before Solon. Yeah, this whole story about this, all the destruction of Atlantis and the Athenian War happening 9,000 years, that didn't happen. This guy nailed it. He knows. His common sense told him, no, man, this ain't true. Randall Carlson, going with the script his handlers have given him, had to ignore that doubt and mow over him. Yeah, that's what happened. Oh, some of these are funny, man. You really pay attention to them.
And Atlantis has always been the big one. That has been the one that everybody talked about, was this incredibly advanced civilization, and no one can figure out where it is.
Right.
Or if it was real.
I think that Atlantis, because surely that wouldn't have been necessarily the name just through like the change of language, over, let's say 12, 13,000 years ago, which would be the time frame. So like surely there would be several different changes of language, but I think
I got to go back. I got to go back to show you. Please pay attention to Jimmy Corsetti's mouth. He does this in all his videos when he's lying. Listen, it's hilarious. Look at this. I got to go back. We got to rewind that.
a civilization that was doing
civilization, and no one can figure out where it is.
right.
Or if it was real.
I think that Atlantis, because surely that wouldn't have been necessarily the name just through like the change of language, over, let's say 12, 13,000 years ago, which would be the time frame. So like surely there would be several different changes of language, but I think it represented a civilization that was doing great things. They were more global than what many people think would be possible. Atlantis was said to be a kingdom made up of, or an empire, made up of 10 kingdoms. And then there was the lost city of Atlantis, which was the capital, which was said to be made up of concentric circles, 2 of water, 3 of land, and essentially that they were obliterated by a cataclysm, as passed down by Plato, although it's worth mentioning that Plato got the story of Atlantis from Solon, who was his uncle separated by 6 generations.
There was a great earthquake. It caused the subsidence of Atlantis, and there was this erosional event that likewise, I think that was even a term used in the translations, that likewise destroyed the ancient armies of Athens and caused this, what sounds to me like an extreme erosional event.
Okay. So, as someone who has read neuro-linguistic programming when I was in prison, I'm very familiar with this technique. You can observe my behavior, you can listen to me, you record my videos, and you will know that I don't deceive people like this. I'm very genuine in my delivery because I know my material. I am very well read. But you were just lied to just now. I'm gonna replay this. But you were lied. It's a very significant lie. Because Randall Carlson is trying to get you to mentally bridge something he's saying right now to something else that he and Graham Hancock have been saying for a long time concerning the destruction of Atlantis being a geological event of Meltwater Pulse 1b. But without saying anything about Meltwater Pulse 1b, he's saying it differently, and he's literally lying about what's in the Platonic narrative. Plato's narrative does not say anything about what he just said just now. Let's go back and listen to that.
And there was this erosional event that
Uncle separated by 6 generations.
There was a great earthquake. It caused the subsidence of Atlantis, and there was this erosional event that likewise, I think that was even a term used in the translations, that likewise destroyed the ancient armies of Athens and caused this, what sounds to me like an extreme erosional event.
Okay. Nowhere in Plato's dialogue, anywhere, does it have anything to do with erosional events. Plato is very, very specific. Atlantis sank beneath the sea in a night and a day, period. He doesn't even go into detail. Atlantis sank beneath the sea in a night and in a day. That's totally abrupt. That is 100% a catastrophist statement that Randall Carlson right here, who I don't know if he really is or if he pretends to be a geologist. I really can't figure it out. Nor do I care. But he's trying to turn it into a geological event. Erosional. There's nothing in Plato's narrative that says the destruction of Atlantis had anything to do with erosion. It was sudden, a night and a day, and they were gone. That's catastrophism. Randall Carlson I'm not saying anything wrong about him. He's a uniformitarian to the core. Totally different school of thought. So Randall Carlson just lied here. There's no erosional event anywhere in Plato. So it's concerning Atlantis. But this is the techniques. This is what they do over and over and over. This is what you got to catch them over and over. I haven't even started my data set. I just wanted to show you this is all they got. It's embarrassing. It is absolutely fundamentally offensive that this lie has been perpetuated so strongly in all these platforms. We're going to continue to name them. Joe Rogan's involved. You can't not name Joe Rogan. He gives them a platform, and he doesn't invite them back to defend themselves. You don't think Joe Rogan's watched Archaich's videos and probably laughed and said, "Yeah, man, you better not debate him. He'll destroy you." Of course he is. Joe Rogan's like anybody else. Now, might be a different story. He's probably got handlers that tell him not to. But still, I have personal friends who are really good friends with Rosie O'Donnell. And you know what? Rosie O'Donnell's real good friends with we're just two degrees away from him. But you know what? He's probably not a bad guy. But he's doing what he's told. And he isn't the only one. Because there's no way in hell that these guys with these major platforms that have had these people like Jimmy Corsetti and Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock telling them a bunch of bullshit would not have them come back to answer somebody who is calling them a liar. There's no way. They would love to see me get destroyed. So why not? Because somebody else is pulling the strings. Now, I haven't even started my data set. I just wanted you guys to see that. Let me go ahead and get rid of this. Remove that. That's all they got. I'm not exaggerating. There's no hyperbole here. You can do your own research by just going to YouTube and put in the search bar Atlantis. And if you want to get specific, Atlantis Hancock, Atlantis Randall Carlson, Atlantis Jimmy Corsetti, and just listen to them talk. There is nothing else they have at all that bridges the Platonic story of Atlantis to this ice age. Don't get wrapped up in all the ice age talk, all the vernacular, all the data, all what's true, what's not, all the theory, because that's how they get you. It has nothing to do with the Atlantis narrative at all. So now, having said all that, we have an itinerary. We do have an itinerary. I'm going to show you that itinerary because some of you, I know my Archaix veterans, you're normally all with the longer videos. I'm going to share my screen. So you should all be able to see that. This is the itinerary for this video. Yeah, this video might go another 2 hours. But this is the itinerary because I don't make claims lightly. My community knows me well. If I tell you something, I'm going to back it up every single time. And I told you that this is the data set that will completely end the debate on the Atlantis dating. And I've also been telling you for 3 years that I've been holding back. Because I've been waiting. I've been waiting as I keep doing call outs and keep sending emails. And I've got friends that are continually calling and emailing these people. And you know what? They just tell them all the time, "Nah, I ain't talking to that dude. I don't owe him a debate." All that's good. They don't. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop. So this entire time, I have been withholding data. Because I'd already released a tremendous amount of data on Atlantis dating to the 13th century BC. More than enough for anybody who wanted to debate to be able to research all this and put their own arguments together. But I've always held back just in case somebody went ahead and decided they wanted to come out and play. But it hasn't happened, and it looks like it's not going to happen. So I need the community to have this information. Maybe other people can take it further than me. Maybe somebody else who's less offensive than me can take this exact same data and go on Joe Rogan and debate these people. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is that stops them from asking. Perhaps it's like I have an 8th grade education and they're embarrassed that I probably know more than they will ever know in 10 lifetimes. That's not, I mean, that's not my fault. I've been reading books my entire life. So this is the itinerary. So this is what you can expect for the next 2 hours. I'm going to overwhelm you with data, and then I'm going to share pictures and I'm going to share videos on YouTube of those who are participating in this misinformation and what the level of participation is, what they're doing. It's real networking, guys. It really is. I just coined that. So the very first section, some of these sections are small, some of them are compelling, a little bit more to them, comprehensive. First section is 9600 BC is dismissed by researchers. These are most researchers you've never even heard of. A small section, an added 0, because that is a popular theory, that somebody added a 0 to 900 years and it became 9,000. So we're gonna go ahead and address that, an added 0. Third section, the Egyptian Sais lunar reckoning is misunderstood by Solon. 4, the Sais reckoning. The Sais lunar reckoning is adopted by researchers who date Atlantis circa 1200 BC. Next section, 11 Atlantis story items that date the event to the late Bronze Age. Comparative chronology dates Atlantis 1200 BC. Comparative chronology is totally different. These are all new arguments. It's totally different than any of these other arguments about the calendars and all that. Comparative chronology is fascinating because it takes the elements of the story and it identifies what was going on in the Mediterranean world at that time. And we take the dates from specialists and scholars that tell us when these things were happening, and we line them out, and it shows, wow, everything Plato mentioned in Timaeus and Critias, everything fits perfectly right there in the 13th century BC. This is comparative chronology. You're going to like this section. The maps argument. Yeah, all these maps. Yeah, Hancock loves to cite these maps that show ice-free Antarctica and ice in Greenland. So, but the maps argument actually works against Hancock and everybody else who's trying to date Atlantis at 9600 BC. Also, Atlantis authors the chain of custody data set. I've added more to this since the last time you guys saw this, but this is the actual chain of custody. Every single ancient author who has mentioned Atlantis all the way to the present day, and then something fundamental happened in the 1800s. You're going to want to hear this. Here are items the Theosophical Society and Helena Blavatsky added to the Atlantis story. Here are the items Rudolf Steiner added to the Atlantis story. Here are the items Anne Besant added to the Atlantis story. Here are the elaborations, they're unique elaborations of Edgar Cayce. Yeah, he added things to the Atlantis narrative as well. So, got to understand, it's very compelling. 2,200 years, and the Atlantis narrative never changed. Even when it was studied by Sir Isaac Newton, nothing had changed in Plato's narrative. People were arguing back and forth when it happened and what was going on. But even Sir Isaac Newton said 9,000 years before Solon is ludicrous. Sir Isaac Newton said that. You'll see. But 2,200 years. That's how well historians preserve. It was argued so much it was impossible to change it. It was impossible to change what Plato had recorded in Timaeus and Critias or Critias. But in those two dialogues, it was impossible for anybody to add anything or take anything out of it, because we have books from almost every century where they were arguing about the different items in the deal. So all of a sudden in the 1800s, a massive amount of fantasy material was added to the Atlantis deal, which had never been in the Atlantis narrative before. So people today propagating the false Atlantis narratives. I'm going to introduce you to them. How the liars are popularized and protected. And I do distinguish between those who are outright lying and those who have genuinely on YouTube and other platforms just made the mistake of copying those who they thought were authorities on Atlantis, like they copied Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, Jimmy Corsetti. I don't know who would look at Jimmy Corsetti as an authority, but still, they copied what they thought was right information, but they have significant populations of listeners, so the damage was done. They have put this out, and it just increases the deception in the community. More and more people actually believe this narrative, and there's nothing to it. So, and the final thing is a 30-point summary of all the data on the Atlantis narrative. You guys are going to want this. Yeah, it is a unbreakable data set. I took all the points and put them in a single all one-liners, a single summary, and it's 30 points that absolutely prove Atlantis was not 9,600 BC. So, let us begin. For those of you that have the stamina, those of you that have the interest, and those of you who want to see that all these authors are full of shit, all this whole stack of books I just showed you, absolute crap. 9600 BC is dismissed by researchers. So, let's see here. We have James Bramall. Oh, remember, every book that I'm citing, every author I'm citing, you saw it in the introduction to this video. And during the introduction, when I was telling the Atlantis story, I showed all the books. When this video is over, I am using the intro video also as the outro, so you can re-see all this Atlantis evidence that I showed on all these books that were read and data mined to produce this material. Many of these authors and books completely ignored by Hancock and by Randall Carlson. I don't even think Jimmy Corsetti said he can read, but all these people that promote the Atlantis narrative as younger Dryas, they had to ignore all this research. First section, 9600 BC, dismissed by researchers. James Bramall in Lost Atlantis wrote, "There is no archaeological evidence for the existence of civilized Greeks in the peninsula before the first dynasty in Egypt." You'll see a list later that dates all these things. That's pretty embarrassing. Six researchers contributed to the 1978 work Atlantis, Fact or Fiction, excellent book, of Indiana University Press. They concluded, archaeology has shown that the Atlantis which Plato describes could not have existed at 9500 BC or thereabouts. At that time, Greece was in the Paleolithic period, and man was still living in caves and rock shelters and was hunting and gathering his food. Settlement was not to begin for another 3,000 years, and even then the process of civilization was a slow one. No amount of rationalization can produce Plato's well-governed, well-structured, and well-protected state in this early period. It's page 18. Also, in 9600 BC, man was in such a primitive state of development that it is impossible to imagine the deluge stories as beginning then and continuing to historical times. That's an excellent point. The first point I want to make here is that these are not a part of my data set. This whole section here is just an overview of what scholarship has said about 9600 BC for the Atlantis dating of Plato. This is not a part of my 30-point data set. I'm just working you slowly into it. Also, it's a really good point that's made here by Indiana University Press. Oh, what was that? Who was that? Oh, Indiana University Press researchers. This is a really good. So they're saying this story itself would have never survived that duration of time. Even as a tradition or a myth, it's too long. It's too long. It would have never survived. So I'm going to say Dorothy Vitaliano wrote that there is no geological evidence at all to show that any mass of land has sunk in the Atlantic as recently as 9600 BC. Yeah, Randall Carlson, he's supposed to be a geologist, right? He should know this. She's not the only one that says this. So Eldon Leet, a seismologist, in his Causes of Catastrophe, mentions Atlantis in passing in his work, writing that there is no evidence to suggest that any landmass had sunk in the Atlantic in the last 11,000 years. On 9,000 Years of Plato, in 1930, Otto Silbermann wrote, Plato's dating of the rise and fall of Atlantis 9,000 years before Solon's time could be dismissed right away. If such a civilization had existed, it would have been entirely forgotten long before the rise of Egypt. Sir Isaac Newton, in his Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms, yeah, he wrote a book on the history of the world. In Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms, outright dismisses Solon's 9,000 years. He wrote, but the priests of Egypt in those 400 years had magnified the stories and antiquity of their gods so exceedingly as to make them 9,000 years older than Solon. To Isaac Newton, he thought that the whole Atlantis affair would have been 400 years before Solon. All right, here's the next section. And again, this doesn't have anything to do with my 30-point data. My data set. This too is just still by way of introduction. We're just removing things from the field that need to be said because it is a popular theory. Some have theorized that the transmission of the story from Egyptian to Greek added a 0 to 900 years, having Plato record 9,000 years before Solon. In Atlantis, the truth behind the legend, A.G. Gallinopoulos and Edward Bacon concluded, quote, it is evident that the Atlantis story refers to a geological event which took place 900 years and not 9,000 years before Solon's visit to Egypt. In Lost Survivors of the Deluge by Gerd von Hassler, we read that the disappearance of Atlantis dating has prompted several analysts to assume that Plato must have misplaced a 0. The sinking of Atlantis, they say, should have taken place between 1400 and 1200 BC. Whatever the sources of the error, the most probable date of the sinking of Atlantis would be the middle of the second millennium, 900 years before Solon. This is according to Emanuel Velikovsky in Worlds of Collision, 1950. So while this is possible, there is a better explanation that solves the mystery. What I'm telling you now is everything I've just read to you has nothing to do with my 30-point data set at all. I'm even removing this argument because while the addition of a 0 does change 900 to 9,000, there is a much better corpus of facts that show us how we got less than 900 years than just the displacement of a 0. It's a good theory, but it's not what happened, is what I'm trying to tell you. Now we begin my data set. Egyptian safe lunar reckoning is misunderstood by Solon. The mystery of the 9,000 years actually being much shorter is solved, and easily. Eudoxus of Cnidos wrote that the Egyptians reckon a month as a year. This is in Jurgen Spanoth, Atlantis of the North. It's also another book in this data set. Eudoxus studied in Egypt and lived during Plato's life. Therefore, he is the most credible when he asserted that the Egyptians reckoned a year as a month. This means the 9,000 years of the Sais priests actually means moons, or 750 years before Solon. 9,000 divided by 12 moons is 750 years. 750 years added to the 570 BC dating of Solon would put us right there at the 13th in early 14th century BC. But this is only 2 people saying this so far. Now you need to follow carefully. And this interpretation comes with an overwhelming amount of ancient and modern corroboration. According to astronomers Victor Klube and Bill Napier in The Cosmic Serpent, there is evidence that the Egyptians at this time, 500 BC, were considered by the Greeks to be counting in months rather than years. You don't hear Graham Hancock quoting this, but you know what you do find? You find Graham Hancock is very familiar with Eudoxus of Cnidos. He just cites him for other things. He cherry picks. He doesn't mention this though. Also, Herodotus, Manetho, Diodorus Siculus, all three wrote that the Egyptians meant month, lunation, when they spoke of years. Quoting Frank Joseph, The Destruction of Atlantis. Manetho was an Egyptian historian. He wrote Egyptiaca. He wrote that the Egyptians employed a lunar calendar. Isn't this interesting? Graham Hancock mentions Manetho so many times you would think he knew him. But right here, we find that Manetho was an Egyptian historian, and he wrote that the Egyptians employed a lunar calendar. Egyptian Greek historian Manetho, 3rd century BC, wrote, "The year I take, however, to be a lunar one, consisting, that is, of 30 days. What we now call a month, the Egyptians used formerly to style a year. The total amounts to 11,000 years. These, however, being lunar periods or months." Frank Joseph, The Destruction of Atlantis. This means when the Egyptians asserted an 11,000 year period, it was translated accurately into solar reckoning as 916 years. This isn't something we can overlook. Graham Hancock has extensively quoted Manetho, Diodorus Siculus, and Eudoxus of Cnidos in his writings, and yet completely been deceitful in not bringing to the public's attention a whole alternate way of completely understanding the 9,000 moons of the Sais priesthood. Solon thought it was 9,000 years. It's right here. It's always been in Graham Hancock's bibliographies. He's read these writers. So it's deception by omission. Diodorus Siculus in Book 1, 26 wrote of the Egyptians, Some men would maintain that in early times, before the movement of the sun had as yet been recognized, it was customary to reckon the year by the lunar cycle. Consequently, since the year consisted of 30 days, it was not impossible that some men lived 1,200 years. Mystery solved. Randall Carlson's not citing this. Jimmy Corsetti's not citing this. But what's really interesting is just these few citations right here. I don't even have to go on with the rest of the video. I could stop the whole video right here. I'm done. I done proved it. Done. But I told you I'm going to overkill this. But these few citations have already killed the entire 9,600 year BC Atlantis with ancient authors that Graham Hancock was already familiar with. Now, can somebody bring this to the attention of Friedman, Lex Friedman, Andrew Schultz, Patrick Ben-David, Joe Rogan? Yeah, who's going to send that email and say, hey, man, this dude exposed them all as liars and absolutely proved it right here. Why don't you have him as a guest, man, calling them out to debate? Why won't they answer for what they've made public? Yeah, it's real simple. You're either run by an intelligence agency or you're not. Plutarch, 2nd century AD, in his work called Lives, wrote, the Egyptian year, at first they say, was 1 month. They have the credit of being a more ancient nation than any, and reckon in their genealogies a prodigious number of years, containing months. That is, as years. You can't get more specific than that. There's no way to not interpret that accurately. That's it. You can't get more specific. This one section here completely destroys it, but I've got multiple sections, and they're all data sets unto themselves. Later authors also agreed. Eusebius wrote that the Egyptian year was a lunar month, as did Lactantius and Macrobius. Thomas Bradwardine, in the year 1340, wrote that Plato's 9,000 years was actually lunar reckoning. I don't know how to say this guy's names, French. Pierre Dailly, in 1370, wrote that 9,000 years was a lunar reckoning system, not solar years. You have to understand, guys, no one in the ancient world, no one in history believed that Plato's deal was 9,000 years. They all knew. It's only recently in time that people started taking the 9,000 years literally, and that's only because they completely, deception by omission, did not cite all these earlier scholars in what they said, or the scholars of the 1200s, 1300s, 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, all. They just totally ignored them all just so they could put out their little Graham Hancock version books. In the year 1572, Pedro Sarmiento de Gamboa wrote that 9,000 years was in reference to a lunar counting system, not a solar one. Also, in the year 1577, Augustine de Zarate, quoting Eudoxus, also said that 9,000 years was actually lunar periods, not solar years. This is scholarship going back centuries. I have these books in my library. You guys, I have quoted them extensively. Archaix veterans know. This is Eugenius Philolethes. I did a whole video on YouTube about this book. Long Livers, a curious history of such persons of both sexes who have lived several ages and grown young again. It was written in 1721, published 1722. This is Eugenius Philolethes. He explains a lot on how the confusion had crept into the records and that it was never actually connected or worked out. Moons had become years. And now, written right here in 1721, we read, and I quote Philolethes, "From reading Lactantius and Plutarch on the life of Numa, the second king of Rome, might be insinuated that the year of the ancients was of no longer duration than one of our months. The Chaldeans and the Arcadians followed this use, as well as some other people, of whom Macrobius speaks in the 12th chapter of the first book, Saturnalia. Some maintain that this long course of years of the ancients was regulated by the lunary movement of 29 or 30 days." I've already destroyed the 9,600 year BC deal. It's all corrected right here, but we have to continue because this just gets better and better. This is still Philolethes. This is still from 1721. But perceiving that these large numbers of years were uniformly carried on and made use of by the most judicious and learned ancient writers, without any imitation or suspicion made by them that they were fabulous, I judged that they were founded on real and true calculations, and only differed from those of other nations in the manner of reckoning, and not in the chronology itself. And I found at last with great satisfaction that the most ancient computation of days for years amongst the Chaldeans, and of months for years amongst the Egyptians, warranted by the testimony of writers of the greatest credit, the most conversant in the histories and antiquities of these nations, reconciled all their accounts together, made them consistent with the course of nature and the history of the first ages of the world. This is Archaix. Archaix is advanced research of chronological history of artificial intelligence X. This statement just summed up my life's research. I am not interested in Atlantis. Atlantis doesn't even feature in any of my 13 or 14 published books. It is always about chronology, the sequential events in history, and how we assimilate all these ancient and modern timekeeping systems. This is all I've ever done in Archaix. Philolethes right here, hell, if reincarnation is real, I was probably this guy. Philolethes. The day count system and the lunar system is what completely corrects all these impossible Vedic ages, Sumerian ages, Mayan long count. Yeah, all that. Every bit of it. Every bit of it's corrected. None of it was wrong. It's just not interpreted accurately. So Philolethes continues. A chronologist named John Jack. Oh, no, excuse me. Philolethes is done. Now we're going to move over to 1752. 30 years later, we have John Jackson, an accredited scholar. This man here was on point. I've done a video on his book too. This is John Jackson, a chronologist who wrote Antiquities and Chronology of the Most Ancient Kingdoms from the creation of the world for the space of 5,000 years. 3 volumes, 1752. John Jackson specifically wrote this to the Duke of Rutland, who was a knight of the most noble order of the Garter. In the text, we read, the seemingly immense numbers of years contained in the Egyptian and Chaldean antiquities and history have made chronologers, without due consideration, reject them as fabulous and romantic. So the 9,600 year BC dude, I got this fly messing with me. I don't know how he got in my studio. Guess when the door was open. But the 9,600 BC dating would be rejected by serious chronologers as fabulous and romantic. That's what he's saying. So he continues, having treated fully of the most ancient years and shown that the original year of all nations was lunisolar and consisted of 360 days, and how the solar and lunar periods were by degrees improved and perfected, and by intercalations made to correspond with each other. Before I proceed to the Egyptian antiquities and chronology, it is necessary to show that in the most ancient times preceding the Noahic flood and after it, the Egyptians reckoned the reigns of their fabulous gods and demigods by years of a single lunar periods only, or of 30 days. This reckoning was peculiar to the Egyptians. This is the Sais lunar reckoning system. This is what they meant when they told Solon that the entire war and destruction of Atlantis happened 9,000 cycles ago. Solon took that as 9,000 years. The Egyptians didn't mean it that way. They probably didn't know he interpreted it that way, because to them it was very simple. It was 9,000 lunations. Their zodiac, the Egyptian zodiac, is lunar. Their timekeeping system was lunar. As a matter of fact, in prior presentations, I've even explained to you guys the Egyptians, according to Herodotus, the Egyptians would not use the sun to count time. Why? Because Herodotus says that the Egyptians had records that the sun had deviated from its course 4 times in recorded history. Therefore, it was playing false, and it was not reliable as a timekeeping system. So they used the moon. The Egyptians reckoned a month for a year in the first ages of the world, and in the reigns of their first fabulous kings, whom they call gods and demigods. This computation enables us to understand perfectly the oldest Egyptian chronology. Yeah, it takes it. All the Egyptian long chronology, that's what it's called, the long kingdom chronology, is false. It's based off a solar reckoning system. Egyptian chronology perfectly matches Harappan, Vedic, Sumerian, Amorite, Assyrian, Hittite. It's perfect. Babylonian. Once you use the system that they employed, lunar. If you use a solar system, it pushes Egypt all the way back to 4,000 BC, and it's not true. It's not true. So Philolethes continues. But it shows that Varro, this is Marcus Varro, Roman historian, it shows that Varro knew that the Egyptians had anciently reckoned the lives of men by a lunar year of 30 days. But when they computed by this year, they represented the lives of the first deified men to consist of many thousands and sometimes myriads of years. Thus, Manetho reckoned the reign of Vulcan, the oldest Egyptian god, to be 9,000 years, which Africanus observed were basically resolved by historians into months, as they were undoubtedly to be understood. Graham Hancock came out of the London School of Economics. I believe that might have been Zechariah Sitchin. I could be wrong. They might have both went there. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but you can quote me on this. As soon as he comes out of college, this man gets a job as an editor for The Economist. I'm not even going to go into the details about The Economist. It's one of the fingers of the control apparatus in the publishing world. But this man, I don't know who he is because he's really hard to research. It's really hard to find any background information on Graham Hancock online. So I've looked, trying to prepare for this video. So Graham Hancock was an editor for The Economist, a journalist. There's no way in hell it's an accident that he ignored Manetho, Diodorus Siculus, Eudoxus, Plutarch, Ammianus Marcellinus. How does he cite all of them for some of his theories, but completely ignores them all when they're correcting the 9,000 years of Solon to 9,000 moons? How does he practice these type of exclusions and yet still claim he's trying to tell the truth? You can't. You can't. There's no mistake here. This is deliberate deception by omission. This is not a mistake. These men are in his bibliographies. So we're still in this one section. We ain't even finished this one section. So Diodorus says, this is about 160 BC. Diodorus says, some of the most ancient kings of the succession of the gods reigned above 1,200 years apiece, and that this appearing incredible, some suppose that the motion of the sun being not known in the first times, the year was described by the revolution of the moon. And with this do other authors of good credit agree, who assure us that the old Egyptian year was lunar. It was a 30-day period. To simplify this in your mind, as ancient history unfolded, to the Egyptian record keepers, every year of the Western world, every year of the world outside of Egypt was actually 12 Egyptian years. Yeah. So a 5-year period. If 5 years had passed outside of Egypt, in Egypt, 60 years would have been recorded to have passed. Yeah, it makes sense of all the pharaonic dynasties, all the numerous pharaohs. Everything makes sense now. One single change to our understanding of how the Egyptians processed time completely answers all the mysteries and makes all these books obsolete. All these crap books with all these crap archaeoastronomy theories, trying to date things using the zodiac going back 10,000 years. It's all crap. Every bit of it. It must also be observed that the antediluvian year containing but 360 days. The above mentioned calculation must be rectified in that respect. And then the 9,000 years of Vulcan's reign before the flood will make 750 years. This way of computation will reduce this and other extravagant numbers we meet with in the Egyptian history within some bounds of credibility. It is no longer theory. 300 years ago, a chronologist literally said the 9,000 years is 750 years. So if the 9,000 years of Vulcan's reign before the flood in the Phoenician records of Sankuniathan is only 750-year period, then the 9,000 years of the Egyptians given to Solon of the destruction of Atlantis is 750 years before the Egyptians told Solon. Done. That is a data set unto itself that completely collapses the whole Hancock narrative. Done. The last little quote from this section. James Bailey in The God Kings and the Titans, 1973, wrote, an ancient Semitic use of the word year was month, and his year did not mean a solar cycle, but a lunar one. Oh my God. I can see it now. Maybe Methuselah wasn't that old. Maybe Adam really wasn't 930 years old. Maybe Enoch didn't actually live 365 years and then ascend into heaven. Yeah, this reinterpretation using the understanding of the ancients who employed these systems now makes sense of the entire historical record. So, yeah, don't believe me, guys. You have to understand. I know many of you are offended by my criminal history. Many of you are offended that I'm a uncouth Southern East Texas, no pronunciating words right, bastard. I get it. You're offended for different reasons. Some of you are offended by my aggression. Some of you are offended by how I look. Many of you are offended by how I talk. But mark my words. Don't get offended by the information because this isn't mine. You have to understand we're not dealing with opinions here. There are no opinions here. These are facts that I'm reading to you. It is an opinion that the 9,000 years refers to 9,000 actual years before Solon. But that opinion has now been overturned by a massive series of historians, authors, researchers, and chronologists going back 24 centuries to Eudoxus. I am not bringing a data set of opinions. Do not ignore the message because you have problems with the messenger. This is the facts, and it completely collapses this entire little publishing dynasty all these guys have. So, the Sais lunar reckoning is adopted by researchers who date Atlantis circa 1200 BC. The reason this data set is a little different than the one before, because the one before is the hardcore information from ancient writers telling us how the Egyptians regarded a year. They saw a year in Egypt to be 30 days, and they saw that the great cycle was 12 years. But 12 Egyptian years is one whole year to the rest of the world, the Western world, because the world in the lunar system, 12 lunar years equals one solar year of the outside world. But the Egyptians didn't give a damn about the outside world. They went by their own reckoning system. They recorded the regnal lists under lunar years. The lives of pharaohs and kings and dynasties all recorded in lunar years. That's why Egyptian history is so impossibly long. This is different. These are modern historians, academics, and researchers who understand how to translate the Egyptian lunar Sais reckoning system into our modern calendar. Look what they get. The Sais lunar reckoning is adopted by researchers who date Atlantis circa 1200 BC. Eberhard Zanger, in The Flood from Heaven, Deciphering the Atlantis Legend 1992, wrote that a lunar conversion of Plato's accounting would give us a date of 1207 BC. Jurgen Spanuth in Atlantis of the North wrote that if the 9,000 years of Plato was converted into moon months of the Egyptian calendar, a year has 13 moons, then we arrive at the period between 1252 and 1175. While Jurgen Spanuth he's Dutch, I believe. He's going by the 13 moon Egyptian calendar. He's the only one I've seen cite that, because all the other citations are of a 12-month lunar calendar, and the 13th month was an intercalation. It was only done like every 12 years. They threw in a 13th month, but it's okay. It doesn't matter. It still produces the 13th century BC. J.M. Allen believes, excellent book I have in my library. I've done a video about this book too. But J.M. Allen, in the Andes, in Atlantis, the Andes solution, believes that the 9,000 years was a reference to lunar months, placing the invasion of Atlanteans into the Mediterranean about 1200 to 1220 BC. And he further mentions that it could be a reference to the Sea People's invasions of Greece and Egypt. Olaf Rudbeck asserts that Plato's 9,000 lunar months places the Atlantean invasion at about 1350 BC. So, the SACE calendar, we're done with all that data. We have collapsed the 9,600 BC. I'm going to ask you to suspend your disbelief and pretend that the video is just now starting. That's how confident I am in this next data set. Just suspend your disbelief and pretend that the video is just now starting and I haven't already told you everything that I just told you. We're going to be looking, remember, if something is true, it's always going to be seen from multiple different mathematical vantage points every single time. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to ignore all the data that I just dropped, and we're going to act like I'm just now starting my presentation. Here's the next section. 11 Atlantis story items that date event to the late Bronze Age. This is an entirely separate data set. So Eberhard Zanger in The Flood from Heaven, Deciphering the Atlantis Legend, wrote that the idea of individual states in Greece, a unified Greek army, citadels, bronze weapons, chariots, a large navy fleet, shipyards, and horse race tracks assume a level of achievement that to be dated 10,000 BC is absurd. But it does correspond to the last centuries of the Bronze Age, 1400 to 1150 BC. Look how close 1150 BC is to 1135 BC. For those of you who don't know, I have a video called The Fall of Atlantis, where I show Atlantis was destroyed in 1135 BC, and it is on the Phoenix 138-year timeline. But we're not talking this. Phoenix is not the topic of this video. So he says, but it does correspond to the last centuries of the Bronze Age and to no other time in Mediterranean prehistory. Atlantis narrative mentions the use of cavalry, and historians know that in the Mediterranean, the use of cavalry was introduced in the Bronze Age and was in use in 1200 BC. That information comes from Jurgen Spanoth. Atlantis researcher Leo Frobenius wrote that the Atlantis story happened during Poseidon worship in the 13th century BC. In Atlantis, The Truth Behind the Legend, A.G. Gallinopoulos and Edward Bacon concluded, we accept that Plato's story is history rather than a fiction or parable. We show that on internal evidence, the events of the story must have taken place in the Bronze Age. For example, between 2100 and 1200 BC. Olaf Rudbeck in 1700 first mentioned that in dating Atlantis, one would need to consider that Plato describes the use of iron by the Atlanteans. This forces a date of at least 7,000 years after the 9600 BC Younger Dryas dating. Plato's account mentions the Libyans, and this is a giveaway as to the 9600 BC dating to be an error. The Libyans first appear in Egyptian records at Merneptah in 1227 BC. It's on the stele of Merneptah. Athens, in all traditions, was founded by Cecrops in the 14th century BC, who came by ship from Egypt. Now, here's a summary of this data. Here's what you need to see from this one little data point. These are 11 points of interest in the story that act as chronomarkers. Plato's account involves Egypt, which began circa 3000 BC. In Plato's narrative is Athens and the Greeks, started 1400 BC. Libya begun in between 1500 and 1100 BC. Poseidon The earliest traces of Poseidon worship is 1600 BC. Naval vessels and fleet. The earliest evidence of any fleets was 2000 BC. Horse domestication and horse baths. The earliest evidence is 3000 to 2000 BC. Canal works. All this is in Plato's narrative about Atlantis. Canal works. That's very precise engineering. Canal works. The earliest is 3000 BC. Iron utensils and smelting. The earliest is 1500 to 1200 BC. Tin mining, 3000 BC. Gold mining and gold statuary. The earliest is 4000 to 3000 BC. And here's a really important one. Cropping land twice a year. It's an agrarian technique, and it's advanced because it takes a lot. It actually doubles your population. It allows a lot more people to survive, to grow. But cropping the land twice a year, the very earliest possible is 3000 BC. So this series of 11 facts absolutely narrows down the date for the Atlantis War against Athens to 1300 to 1200 BC. These 11 facts completely collapse the Atlantis was Younger Dryas dating of 12,000 years ago, and therefore also does away with the Rishak structure as being Atlantis. I've already got 2 videos on that structure and Jimmy Corsetti's research. It's total garbage. It's all supposition. And amazingly, Randall Carlson, I agree on that because we both agree that's not Atlantis. Okay, so here's the next data set. This is all one big long data set. It's broken into sections. Here's another data set. It stands alone as well, just like the previous ones. This is a comparative chronology. A comparative chronology dates Atlantis 1200 BC. This is a very different one here. Homer in the Iliad tells us that the earth was divided into 3 portions between Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. This would have been after the age of the Titans and the flood. Aligning this to biblical chronology, the Great Division being 1899 BC, this is the Babel dispersion, and in Chronicon you guys can see all the data in there that shows why this is the date and all the authors who dated it here. This would put the founding of Atlantis somewhere about 1700 to 1600 BC because it's after the great trifold division. Remember when the Jews were in Babylon in the 5th century and they were writing the book of Genesis using Babylonian Amorite libraries, they had changed it to Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But in the Greek version, which is older, most people don't know this, the Greek version is older, and the division was between Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Still, Atlantis wasn't founded until after Poseidon was given his portion, his third of the world. That would place Atlantis after 1899 BC, and its founding around 1700 BC. And then it survived for a few centuries before it went to war with Athens. Next one. Atlantis was named after Atlas the Titan. Atlas lived just prior to the Titanomachy, or the Great War between the Titans and the Giants. Titans were defeated by Zeus, and Atlas was punished with holding up the sky in the western part of the world. His name is the origin for the word Atlas, descriptive of maps and notes of knowledge about geography. Plato explicitly states that Atlantis was named after Atlas, son of Iapetos, who is the Japheth or Jupiter of scripture and Roman tradition. He was a Titan. Atlas was a brother of Poseidon, who founded the island civilization. Proclus in the 5th century AD references Plato's original account and confirms he basically confirms that Atlantis was named after Atlas. Poseidon worship is traced back to pre-Greek times among the Mycenaean maritime culture, and possibly, though not verified by archaeology, to the late Minoan period of 1700 BC. If Atlantis was named after Atlas, son of Iapetus, then by traditional Greek chronology, Atlantis was founded after 1700 BC. Even within the context of the Greek mythological structure, there is no room for an Atlantis at 9600 BC. Next, Alexander Bragin in The Shadow of Atlantis, 1940, wrote that Diodorus Siculus related that the Sahara in North Africa was part of Triton's lake, and that ancient historians asserted that an earthquake that sank Atlantis at the same time drained the lake and created part of the desert. German scientists published that Lake Triton was dried up around 1250 BC. They have nothing to do with Atlantis. They're not even trying to date Atlantis. They studied the Sahara Desert and that area that Diodorus Siculus claimed was underwater. It was called Lake Tritonus or Triton Lake. And the German scientists determined that this area of North Africa dried up around 1250 BC in consequence of a tremendous earthquake. Same thing as Atlantis, an earthquake. So we see here that an ancient tradition recorded by Diodorus Siculus is connected to a German scientific conclusion that that area had dried up in 1250 BC. Atlantis researcher Albert Herman wrote that Plato erred in the 9,000 years allegedly told to Solon, and that the Atlantis narrative was dated with Theseus period of the 14th to 13th century BC. So in his own research, he saw that Atlantis civilization was contemporary with the Theseus period of ancient Athens. According to astronomers Victor Klube and Bill Napier in The Cosmic Serpent, the drowning of Atlantis seems to relate to events observed in the sky at or about 1200 BC. F. The Minoan hypothesis. A.G. Gallinopoulos and Edward Bacon in Atlantis, The Truth Behind the Legend, date the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt at 1447 BC exactly, and link the darkness over Egypt to the volcanic eruption of Santorini on Thera that destroyed Crete. It is their theory that the sophistication of the Minoans is the origin of the Atlantean narrative. Dr. Gallinopoulos dated the Atlantis origin to events in 1400 BC. Charles Pellegrino in Unearthing Atlantis, 1991, concludes in 302 pages of research, not including a good bibliography, that origin of Atlantis story was from 1500 BC. There are many academic studies that show that around 1177 to 1130 BC, a great collapse of civilization occurred and the Great Mediterranean Dark Age began. Earthquakes, sky darkening, and disasters are the reports of the time. Atlantis is associated by many authors as a part of the start of the Great Mediterranean Dark Age. Everything fits perfectly. It all fits absolutely perfect. What doesn't fit is 9600 BC nonsense. Linking Atlantis narrative to the Sea People's invasions and the cataclysm that began the Great Mediterranean Dark Age has many researchers dating Atlantis to about 1200 BC. Yeah, it's real simple, guys. The Sea Peoples themselves who invaded the Mediterranean from the Atlantic are the Atlanteans. It's real simple. The astronomer Professor H.A.T. Reich, in The Language of Archaic Astronomy, A Clue to the Atlantis Myth, in Technology Review magazine, wrote that the destruction of Atlantis dates to about 1200 BC. Emanuel Velikovsky wrote that the cataclysm that ended Atlantis was about 1200 BC, and it destroyed the Greeks as well. That would have been the Great Mediterranean Dark Age. Both the statements in the Atlantis narrative itself and all other relevant data indicate that the events described are those of the decades just before and after 1200 BC. Tony O'Connell has listed So many sources showing that the Atlantis narrative is not 9600 BC, but that it is actually the 13th century BC. Tony O'Connell, his book is called Joining the Dots. Robert Argod is a historian who mentions that this is the time period, 1340 to 1350 BC, of the Atlantis narrative, dated contemporary with the invasion of the Sea Peoples. Oh, here's a good one. Some of y'all are going to laugh about this. So this is David Hatcher Childress in Lost Cities of Atlantis, Ancient Europe and the Mediterranean, on page 72 of his own book. This is what he said. Some scholars have even tried to equate the invasion of the Sea Peoples with the invasion from Atlantis that Solon mentioned in Plato's account. The logic is that the 12th century BC had a great war, and an invasion from the west did occur, as Plato had said. Therefore, Plato was embellishing on the early Greek history and had his dates wrong. This would place the war with Atlantis at only 1,000 years before Plato, rather than 9,000 years. David Hatcher Childress nailed it, told the absolute truth, and then continued talking, which he shouldn't have done, because he then put his foot in his mouth, and I hope he's listening, and I hope he's followed this entire data set, and he realized how dumb this next statement is. Then Childress goes on and completely destroys his own logic by asserting that he believed the 9,600 BC dating anyway, because the Greeks should be relied upon to know their own history. Unbelievable. The Atlantis story is not Greek. Atlantis shows up nowhere in Greek mythology. It is simply a story that is transmitted from Egypt to one person. And it went through a lot of hands before it got to Plato. Unbelievable. Get some water real quick. I haven't checked my chat in what, hour? Oh, we're at the fine structure constant. 1 hour and 37.05 seconds. Yeah. Good time to check the chat. Oh, yeah, we got some juicy remaining. We've already destroyed 9,600 BC. It's done. It's done. We've already destroyed it. It's literally, it comes to the point now. I'm really curious to see how many YouTubers are going to come behind this and extrapolate. Maybe do a critique on it. How about show? Well, look, man, Archaix showed this. It's very compelling. We got, if you're not going to debate me, debate them. I want to see how much they double down. I really want to see how much they double down behind this. Because an intelligence agency is pulling the strings and telling these huge platforms what to accept and what not to, what they're going to allow and all that, then yeah, this is going to be met with silence. But I'm cool with that because you see how well I've thrived being ignored. It's all good. Because you guys aren't dumb. In the community, I already know. I see comments all over all platforms everywhere. I see what's going on. Yeah, it's Archaix. People are mentioning Archaix research and platforms everywhere, and comments are being deleted. But there's going to hit a tipping point. Yeah, there's going to come a time where they're going to have to come to the table. After seeing all this data here, there's no way that a reasonably intelligent trier of fact can deny this data set. If anyone keeps pushing the 9,600 BC narrative, it's because they're controlled opposition. Somebody is making them do that, which means they are a slave. There's no other way to interpret that. We are listening to slaves lie to us about historical things that are easily disproven. There's no other way I can process that information. Just no way. I told you from the beginning this was going to be an unassailable data set. So crazy. So crazy. Yeah, they signed the contract. They're probably all under NDAs. Yeah, I have 2 different copies of Plato too. And guys, you can read that Plato front to back and you will find out. We haven't got there yet. We're almost there. We haven't got there yet, but you're going to see the massive changes that were changed to the of the Atlantis story in the 1800s. Oh yeah, 22 centuries. Plato's Atlantis story was unchanged. And then all of a sudden, the Theosophical Society decided they wanted to rewrite the whole Atlantis story. Let's see here. All right. So here's the maps argument. So let me share my screen just so we're all on the same page, because this is a very compelling argument. I'm already sharing my screen. What am I talking about? Charts. Here's the maps. I may have to share a different. Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to share a different screen. Okay, I can only do one thing at a time here. Let's see. Let's go ahead and get rid of this one. I'm gonna share my screen again. Oh, stop screen. Okay, stop screen. Share it over again. Put me through all these changes. Window. Okay, there it is. All right, so show these maps. I'm only going to show just so we're on the same page. I'm not trying to go in this direction. I just want you to understand we're on the same page. So Graham Hancock makes a real big deal in his books about maps of Antarctica, showing that 500 and 600 years ago, there were maps in circulation that showed Antarctica with no ice, showing where the rivers, the valleys, the mountains, and coastlines were, where they can't be seen today because of the ice pack, which goes a mile to a mile and a half high, whatever. So this is gaslighting, because in no way do these maps support the idea that the Ice Age was 13,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, 11,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 9,000 years ago. It's total gaslighting. It's the same technique I was telling you guys about, like we caught Randall Carlson doing. It's the same exact, it's like mental gymnastics. We're talking about Atlantis. Why do you keep jumping to Younger Dryas? Well, Younger Dryas, a rock fell out of the sky and created this huge. I say, well, what's that got to do with Atlantis? Well, Atlantis was destroyed. Yeah. Why are you crossing hairs here? You have not bridged that. Oh, yeah, but 9,000 years before Ceylon. That's the only bridge they've got. 9,000 years before Ceylon. So we have destroyed that right here in one single Archaix presentation. It is gone. There is no way to default back to 9,000 years before Ceylon. It is 750 years. It is established by multiple different species of analysis. It is established. So without that one thing that Jimmy Corsetti has, Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, and all the rest of them, that one item has now been destroyed. There is no way to bridge the Atlantis story to the Younger Dryas period. It is impossible. It's done. And the maps are not evidence. These maps are not evidence of what Graham Hancock's claiming. They're not. He claims they are copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of copies times 10, all the way going back to copies from that were made right around, the last ice age, or the last time there was a warming period between ice ages. Yeah, these maps don't show that. These maps, that's gaslighting. These maps are evidence that we're in an ice age right now. They're also evidence that the Atlantis story wasn't in 11,000 years ago, because maps would have never survived that, no matter how many times you copy them. You're really going to sit here and try and pass off that navigational maps, copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of copies have survived, although we don't have any Sumerian, we have nothing in the human written record that has survived that long, but maps do, because they support your argument. Shut up, man. Just shut up. So sick of that dude, man. I'm so sick of that dumb, pedantic, stupid arguments. These maps are evidence of a cataclysm very recently, and that we're not looking at an ice age in the ancient past. We're in one now, or the ice wouldn't be there. And we weren't in an ice age 600-700 years ago when they drew the maps. For those of you who don't know, there's over 6 or 7 different maps that show, and they've been studied meticulously, and they underneath that ice pack, the maps got the details absolutely correct on the geographical features. That's only possible if they had recently surveyed those areas. Yeah, it's total gaslighting. It's total gaslighting. Maps do not support Graham Hancock's theories. They actually decimate it. Anyway, I'm done with that. So I got to share my screen back so we can get to where we're going. Sorry for that little tangent. I get a little passionate at times. All right, sharing the screen, share the window. I feel like the Pink Panther. I'm in the middle of an investigation. Turning up every stone. Look behind that door. Look, it's the Younger Dryas. Damn. Find an old book in a strange language. Open it up. Go through it. Don't let Graham Hancock see it. He's going to do a video. This book here survived from the Younger Dryas period. That's why we can't read it. That's why we can't understand it. Yeah, man. An editor for The Economist magazine who went to college for sociology became one of the greatest well-known published authors of all time based on a whole pile of horse shit, easily disproven lies. That is so embarrassing. Joe Rogan, you must be embarrassed. Lex Fridman, you must be embarrassed that y'all's personal hero has been dissected like this. It's embarrassing. It is embarrassing. Anybody who has fallen for the Graham Hancock deal, it's forgivable. But once you see the accurate information, yeah, there's no more looking at that like, oh man, it's just like it's a type of fraud. You know you're lying from the beginning. You made millions off all these books. And not only that, your publishers also signed contracts with all these other authors, and they all push the same Younger Dryas narrative that you promoted. They all use the same deal. Dude, it's huge. The graft is huge. It's no different than like the NFL. NFL is labeled as entertainment. So when they throw games, it's legal. They're allowed to throw games. They're allowed to give their referees commands to do a false call. All sports are like that. But nobody wants to talk about it. Why? Because it's massive graft. It changes gambling to worldwide systemic money laundering. Yeah, man. Jason's not going to be quiet. I'm going to keep on attacking this BS crap ass narrative that these authors keep putting out. But when it comes to Atlantis, I'm done. I done did it. We're about to move over to some other important topics until I have completely dissected and completely destroyed the narratives that are promoted in these BS books. But that's the map. The existence of maps showing ice-free Antarctica and Greenland are an argument for the fall of Atlantis to have been in the 13th century BC rather than 8,000 years before, because no one with a modicum of intelligence is going to believe that copies of maps were maintained since the Younger Dryas 11,600 years ago. 6,600 years before Sumer, Akkad, Assyria, Babylonia, Hittite Anatolia, India, Mohenjo-Daro, and the founding of Egypt. We've got nothing from those civilizations dating back that far, but you got copies and copies and copies and copies of maps because you're claiming that ice pack is evident of your theory of a night. It's gaslighting. There's no intellectual way to bridge the two, yet you still did it in your dumbass books. It's so crazy. But it's not so hard to believe copies of maps survived since the 13th century BC, because this is only 3,000 years duration to the dating of these maps in the 1500s and 1700s and after. Think about it. The copies of these maps are now after Sumer, Akkad, Assyria, Babylonia, the Hittites, India, and ancient Egypt began and mostly passed. Now, Ralph Ellis and I were kind of bouncing ideas around, and we talked about the sudden appearance of all the maps in the world were at the same time the Jolly Roger started getting flown, when, the papacy, and I think it was King Louis or one of the Spanish kings, hatched a conspiracy against the Knights Templar. So what's really interesting is it's the exact date in the Anno Domini calendar, 1307 to 1314 AD, as all the Atlantis stuff unfolding in the BC calendar. How's that for a coincidence? All of a sudden, these maps are everywhere, showing all this unusual stuff. As soon as the Templars had to catch out their castles and take to the high seas. Ice-free maps of Antarctica are evidence of an Atlantis destroyed in 1200 BC, not 9600 BC, if you even want to use the maps as evidence for Atlantis period. So crazy, guys. It's just so crazy. So here's the Atlantis author's chain of custody data set. So there's new. Some of you have heard this, but I had to add new details that I had just recently discovered. So Plato, 200 years after Solon, heard it from the priests who interpreted from the inscriptions. So a lot of Atlantis researchers say that Plato received the Atlantis story fourth hand. It went through 4 people before it got to him. So it is supposedly on a pillar in Egypt. Priests read it, interpreted into Greek for Solon. Solon brought it back and told his grandson Critias. Timaeus heard it, and then through them it was somehow passed through other people and made it to Plato. So in universal history, from the earliest time of account to the present, the year 1740, it's a book. It's a whole bunch of different authors, but it's a book that says, Lucan and Diodorus, we find that the Atlantis story is from a poem that came into Plato's possession. Plato wrote his story around 360 BC. He received the story fourth hand before writing it down. Plato's version is the sole source of the account. About 600 BC, an Egyptian priest told it to the Greek Solon. Solon of Athens told it to the young Critias, his grandson, when he was a 10-year-old boy. Young Critias eventually retold it to his friend Plato. Do you understand what's being said here? This is the historical record. This is the chain of custody for the Atlantis story. In the chain of custody is that Critias admits that he was a 10-year-old boy when he heard the story, and that he has transferred it to Plato in his old age. Emanuel Velikovsky makes this pertinent observation. Critias the younger remembered having been told that the catastrophe which befell Atlantis happened 9,000 years before. But there is 1 0 too many here. That's Emanuel Velikovsky's idea. He subscribed to the idea that the 9,000 years was wrong because somebody added a 0. So numbers we hear in childhood easily grow in our memory, as do dimensions. When revisiting our childhood home, we are surprised at the smallness of the rooms. We had remembered them as much larger. It's a good point. Good argument. Aristotle, get this, this is very important. This is a part of the Atlantis story chain of custody. Aristotle was a student of Plato, and he knew him better than anybody else. But Aristotle was also his intellectual superior. Anybody who has ever read posterior analytics knows what I'm talking about. Aristotle was way smarter than Plato. Aristotle was a student of Plato and his intellectual superior. Aristotle dismissed the the Atlantis narrative. Aristotle, the erudite, wrote concerning Atlantis, the man who dreamed it up made it disappear. That's a quote from Aristotle, the man who Plato taught. The man who dreamed it up made it disappear. Philo mentioned Atlantis, this being 300 years after Plato, and only mentions what he read in Plato. Christian authors 500 years after Plato began referencing Atlantis, but it was always in reference back to Plato. Why? Because there's no Atlantis story in the Greek mythological tradition. None. Atlantis is no story like Atlantis is even found in the whole corpus of Greek tradition. This was an Egyptian story. Longinus in the 3rd century AD agreed with Aristotle that the Atlantis story was made up by Plato. Then we have a reference 700 years later by Proclus, a Neoplatonist of the 5th century AD, who claims that Crantor also visited Egypt and confirmed Plato's story. But we don't have these writings from Crantor, and this still does not support the 9,000 years instead of 9,000 month system used by the Egyptians. There are many scholars that dismiss Crantor because it wasn't mentioned by any other authors. Crantor is not cited. It comes from Proclus. But it doesn't even matter if it's true or not. It still it doesn't take anything away. During the Dark Ages, all references to Atlantis stopped. Hans Bellamy notes that Atlantis was no more mentioned for centuries after the 6th century AD and states it was because of the Dark Ages. It is believed that they resurfaced only later because they were preserved by Arab scholars. I am impressed with Randall Carlson for understanding that the transference of the Atlantis narrative did come through the Arab scholars. So I was listening to Randall Carlson, and yeah, he knew about. He's impressive on many things. Randall Carlson and I could probably drink some beers together. He's very impressive on a lot of topics, but he's a uniformitarian, and I'm never going to agree with that. And his uniformitarian perspective is always going to have him dating things far too early in the past. Middle Ages, Renaissance. No changes to the Atlantis story. 1552 AD, Francisco Lopez was the first to suggest that Atlantis may have been America. And I agree. I've done videos agreeing with this. So, 19th century, Atlantis story changed. Major additions by the Theosophical Society, Helena Blavatsky, Golden Dawn Society, Anne Besant, Rudolf Steiner, Edgar Cayce. This is where all the madness started. The story of Atlantis with Plato remains unchanged until the mid-1850s. And then all of a sudden, it just went off. People just started adding all kinds of details to the Atlantis story that never priorly existed. Tom O'Connell notes the important fact that nothing in the Atlantis narrative of Plato is remarkable. Everything mentioned were things that existed in Greek history and were known in the day of the 4th century BC when Plato wrote the narrative. Nothing in the Critias, nothing in the Timaeus, nothing in the Republic, nothing in Plato's writings was remarkable. Nothing. It's all standard Greek stuff. All the fantasy about Atlantis was introduced. It says right here centuries later, but actually it's millennia later. Most people's ideas of Atlantis are affected by what writers invented in the last 200 years and have little to do with the Plato version, which is the original and the only version about Atlantis. Atlantis destruction narrative does not involve pole shift. Do you have any idea how many books have spent chapter after chapter after chapter trying to link pole shift to the Atlantis narrative? Atlantis destruction narrative does not mention or even describe a pole shift, a comet. Nothing falls from the sky. There's no Younger Dryas impact or any impact whatsoever. It is simply an earthquake and subsidence. I don't know. You know what? It could be subsidence. I don't know how to pronounce that word, and nor do I care. It is an earthquake and a flooding. And Atlantis sank beneath the sea in a night and a day. Done. So we get, here are items the Theosophical Society and Helena Blavatsky added. Please pay attention. I got more to show you after this, but please pay attention, because nothing I'm about to read is in Plato's narrative at all. This was all added by mystics and occultists starting in the mid-1800s. Every bit of this is fantasy that was added to the narrative. Atlanteans had advanced spiritual and psychic powers. Total fantasy. Multiple root races of human civilization narratives are attached to Atlantis. Atlanteans possessed advanced technological capabilities, all BS. The claim that Atlanteans could communicate telepathically. None of that is in Plato's narrative. Suggestions that Atlanteans had highly developed energy manipulation skills. None of that is in Plato's narrative. Described Atlantean civilization as spanning multiple subspecies and evolutionary changes. None of this. It is all pure invention of the Theosophical Society, its agents, and several mystics and occultists that seem to be networked together in the 1800s. None of it. Here are items Rudolf Steiner added to the Atlantis narrative. The foundation of Atlantis was 80,000 years ago. Total BS. Spiritual evolutionary stages of Atlantean consciousness has nothing to do with Plato's narrative. Steiner described different epochs of Atlantean development. Nowhere near it. Nothing in there. It's not even close. Claimed Atlanteans had clairvoyant perception different from modern consciousness. They were normal humans just like us. Rudolf Steiner suggested that Atlanteans had dreamlike collective intelligence. Every bit of this is BS. None of it is in Plato's narrative at all. And Plato is the sole origin and the only source for the Atlantis story. There are no others. The story remained unchanged for 22 centuries until the Theosophical Society. Here are Anne Besant's additions to the Atlantis narrative. And I think she went down in history in 1902 as being the first female admitted into the fraternal Freemason Society. Maybe she founded the Sisters of the Eastern Star. I can't remember. But here are Anne Besant's additions to the Atlantis narrative. She describes detailed spiritual hierarchies within the Atlantean society. She described complex metaphysical structures of Atlantean civilization. She connected Atlantis to broader theosophical cosmological narratives, and none of that is in Plato. It is all mystical material that was added in the 1800s. Here are Edgar Casey's additions to the Atlantis story. Specific geographical locations of Atlantis. Technological details about crystal energy systems. Claimed Atlanteans had advanced healing technologies. Suggested multiple periods of Atlantean civilization. Described specific cataclysmic events leading to Atlantis' destruction. Every bit of this. None of it at all is in Plato's narrative. Especially the last one, describes specific cataclysmic events leading to Atlantis' destruction. Now, all Edgar Casey didn't nail anything. All this is pure invention. Every bit of it. It's pure invention. It's sad too. It's really sad. This is why, who is it? Darius J. Wright, OBE specialist, talks about Atlantis. He went to Atlantis. He in an OBE. That's why I know he's full of shit. But I've been knowing because I know his history. But yeah, the OBE guys, a bunch of the NDEs, near-death experience, out-of-body experience, a whole bunch of these people all talking about Atlantis or using Atlantis in any way for their narratives. And I know they're all full of shit. They haven't read Plato. They should read Plato before they go to, instead of just relying on Rudolf Steiner, relying on Helena Blavatsky, who is believed largely to be an agent. But Helena Blavatsky, Anne Besant, Rudolf Steiner, they're not the only ones. The Theosophical Society and then later the Order of the Golden Dawn, they're the ones that added all this material and then the Rosicrucians joined in and they started adding material to the Atlantis narrative too. But every bit of that is 22 centuries after the Atlantis story was transmitted all the way to the 1850s unchanged. With no mumbo jumbo. So we get to the final part of this presentation. Then I'm going to show you some pictures. 30-point summary of all the data on Atlantis narrative. Here is a summary of the 30 points of this unbreakable data set, proving that 9,600 years BC is not the dating of Atlantis. Here it is. 30-point summary of all the data on the Atlantis narrative. 1. Atlanteans were descendants of Poseidon. Here's the date. 2. Atlantis was at war with the Athenians. Athenians were founded circa 1400 BC. 3. No archaeological evidence of civilized Greeks before Dynasty of Egypt. 4. No geological evidence of any sunken land masses in Atlantic as recent as 9600 BC. 5. Egyptian Sais lunar reckoning measured years as 30 days. 6. Egyptian reckoning makes Solon's 9,000 lunar years to be 750 solar years. 7. Egyptians witnessed the Atlantean War. Egypt founded circa 3000 BC. 8. Libya mentioned in war. Libya first mentioned in Egyptian records 1500 to 1100 BC. 9. War involved naval warfare in fleets dated 2000 BC at the earliest. Horse domestication 3000 at the earliest. Canal works 3000 at the earliest. Iron utensils and smelting 1500 at the earliest. Tin mining 3000 at the earliest. 3000 BC. Gold mining, gold statuary, 4000 to 3000 at the earliest. Cropping land twice yearly is 3000 BC at the earliest. Number 16, war was after a world divided between Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. This would be 1700 to 1600 BC. 17, Atlas was brother of Poseidon and son of Iapetos. This is 1700 to 1500 BC. 18, war was after Atlas fought in Titanomachy. This would mean 1700 BC at the earliest. 19, war was after Atlas was punished by Zeus. This is 1600 to 1500 BC at the earliest. 20, Atlantis was founded by Poseidon, but named after Atlas. This would be 1500 to 1400 BC. 21, ancient historians wrote Lake Tritonus drained out when Atlantis was destroyed by a quake. 22, German scientists published Lake Tritonus drained circa 1250 BC by a quake. 23, Atlantis history dated to Theseus period. This will be 14. This is the Athenian Theseus period. This is 14th to 13th century BC. 24, astronomers published Atlantis destruction dates to circa 1200 BC. 25, the Minoan hypothesis experts date Atlantis destruction circa 1400 BC. Remember, the Minoan hypothesis is very different than any of the other ones. They have their own data sets they're going by. They're not going by the Sais lunar reckoning. 26, Sea People's Invasion hypothesis dates Atlantis war to the 13th and 12th century BC. 27, 500-year-old maps of ice-free Antarctica are evidence of a recent ice age, not a younger Dryas dating. 28, much of the Atlantis story is memory of old man recalling what he had heard as a 10-year-old boy. 29, Plato's own student Aristotle wrote that the Atlantis story was fiction. 30, Plato's Atlantis story remained unchanged for 2,300 years until the Theosophical Society and Helena Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner, Anne Besant, and the Order of the Golden Dawn and Rosicrucian publications in the 1800s added mystic, occult, pseudo-historical accounts, the paranormal, and spiritualist attachments to the narrative. That's it. Now I can show you some pictures. That is the Atlantis data set. I'll post a whole bunch of this in X later. If you guys want to go to Twitter, I will post a whole bunch of that for you. But meanwhile, I'm going to share these pictures now. Give me some more water real quick. That is 2 hours and 9 minutes, and I covered all that data. I can't believe it. Now I'm going to show you who's guilty as charged. I did kind of rush through it, but then again, I don't really care. I don't really care. Yeah, none of these people can defend their claims. None of them. That's how you know this is some type of intelligence op. You know, this is some type of weird. And they're all involved. They're all involved. Let me show you. Yeah, let's quit talking about it. Let's just show you. All right, let me get rid of that. Stop the screen on that one. I'm gonna share my screen again. Where are we going? So before, I didn't even think to show you this. Yeah, I can go through this first. There's going to be new people to the channel, so I'll just show this because it shows how ridiculous this whole thing is. I'll show one chart before I go show you these pictures. All right, share my screen. All right. You can see this. It's so easy to see. When you look at it in a linear two-dimensional chart, Graham Hancock's version of Atlantis being 9,600 BC, it's on the far left. Look at that large circle. It's 6,800 years of no historical documents. That's 6,800 years until the building of the Great Pyramid, according to all academia. Academia has them in the 29th century BC, the building of the Great Pyramid. There it is. The historical record is even after the building of the Great Pyramid. Look at 2239 BC, the little circle. This is where we have in the historical record Sumer, Egypt, Babylonia, Harappa, China, the Andean South American civilizations, all right here. This is where they're at. Here's the Typhon flood, 2239 BC, very well attested. I'll debate that too. I got good videos on that. A lot of data. Published books on that date. But look, you're told to believe the Atlantis narrative is this big circle, way over here. During this entire empty period, you've got no ancient authors, no chronology, no historical period, no anthropology, no archaeology, no traditions, no myths, nothing that fills this gap between the Younger Dryas period at 9,600 BC. I don't know where I went. What happened? Lost that map. I got different versions of the same map. Yeah, but here's looking at it from a different perspective. Here it is right here. Hancock's Younger Dryas is way here on the left. He thinks Atlantis was right here. Look at this. Ubaid, Sumer, Harappa, Egypt, Maya, Olmec, Babylon, Jericho, Malta, Stonehenge, Newgrange, Mari, Ugarit, Rashamra, China, Urimbaba. All this is right here. That's embarrassing. It is such an anachronism. It is embarrassing. There's Atlantis right there. Sea peoples in Atlantis right here. It's somewhere in the middle of that gap. That's Atlantis in that gap. In 1135 BC is when it sank in the ocean, which is on the Phoenix chronology of 138-year episodes. Yeah, when you look at a chart like this, it's very comprehensible how big the mistake is. It's not a little mistake. It is a huge mistake. Huge mistake. All right, it's good enough. We look at all this. We've looked at all this in the past. That's a good one, Runaway Train. That's a good one, Runaway Train. So the Atlanteans had all this psychic power, but never foresaw their fate. Yeah, man. So where are we going? What file? We got all these files. We're done. We're done with charts. We're done with Antarctic maps. Yeah. So let's go look at this one. Yeah. Let's look at some people. Let's look at some faces here. Look at some faces. Let me share my screen again. So Atlantis is extremely popular. It's extremely popular. It's all, you go to YouTube, put Atlantis in the search bar, you're going to come up with all kinds of things. So the History Channel, which is not even about history, it's about fantasy. Oh, it's right here. The History Channel, totally bogus channel. But the search for Atlantis, you can see it right here. And then you got Fall Asleep to the entire story of Atlantis. It's all cute. Here's our guy. Here's our hero right here. The Randall Carlson. He's the dot connector. He's got a whole bunch of dots that all stack up in the Younger Dryas period, and he's got one single dot he's got to stretch 9,000 years to a place that doesn't even belong in the 13th century BC. So here's Randall Carlson right here on YouTube, one of his videos. Dude underneath him is talking about the lost city of Atlantis explained. Here we got these guys. I've heard of Danny Jones. I really don't know anything about him. I don't know what his positions are. I have no idea. Do I need to add him to this list of all these other protector, gatekeeper platforms? I don't know. Y'all tell me. I have no idea. I don't know anything about him. But yeah, here's Atlantis is extremely popular. Here's Jimmy Corsetti, Bright Insight. So he's using as evidence this map right here. This is the same mistake Jason Tice makes. Oh, this is a concept piece. This same map maker that did this also did the Atlantis map showing Atlantis above the deal. It's a concept map. Atlantis is not there. It's all ocean now. But he did a map showing Atlantis. And the same cartographer, Athanasius Kircher, also drew this map right here, which is a concept piece because they didn't know in the 1500s what was really at the North Pole. So they made up this whole little thing with this mountain at the center of the North Pole and these four rivers, and it's just a copy of the Eden story of the four rivers. It's ridiculous. So Bright Insight, who's not bright at all, he needs to change his name. He's using this concept piece, Athanasius Kircher. Remember Athanasius Kircher? He drew the map that shows Mundus Subterraneus, shows the underworld. It's all concept pieces. None of it's actual. But both Jay Dreamers and Jimmy Corsetti are both using these maps as if they're representing something real when they're not. Here's just more Atlantis. There's our guy. There's old Graham right there. And this is Matt LaCroix right here. I don't know where they get these guys. If they have like a CIA cloning facility or something, I don't know, man. Because Michael Button comes out, looks just like Matt LaCroix. Both Matt LaCroix and Michael Button, if they ever merge those two clones, they would produce a Jimmy Corsetti clone. They all look alike, and they're all saying the exact same misinformation, and they're all being promoted by the exact same platforms. What is going on? You tell me in the comment section what in the hell is happening here. It's so crazy. I've called him out. Graham Hancock, I've called him out to debate, sent emails, posted the emails publicly. I've got personal friends that have contacted him. The man's not going to come to the table ever because he knows his role. Yeah, this isn't an intellectual mistake. It's a calculated deception. Matt LaCroix, he's like the kind of guy. He's kind of the guy that's just passionate, wants to everybody to know, to believe that he's telling you the truth. He wants to be telling the truth. But Matt LaCroix, he hit a wall when he was working with Billy Carson, and that wall was archaics. And I'm not saying this in pride or anything, but I saw the change in Matt in several videos, and that change told me that I had affected him deeply because I was providing all this data to show Billy Carson was wrong, and Matt LaCroix was right there side by side with him, and you realize, damn, Billy Carson used me to get this book published. I wrote 90% of the book. And then the little 10% Billy Carson did is nothing but ChatGPT crap he added to the end so he could slap his name on the cover. I called that shit out, man. Matt LaCroix was the one that wrote that book. He knows he got in bed with the wrong people, but it's too late. It's too late. Here's Jordan Crowder. He's been on my channel a few times, but he's talking to this guy, Jason Reza Jordani. I don't know anything about him. I haven't even watched this video. but I'm not liking it. Atlantis, Nordics, and Cataclysms. I don't know where they're going with this. I'm assuming that Jason Giordani may have fallen for the Theosophical Society Golden Dawn psyop. We're talking about Nordics doesn't sound at all like Plato's narrative. I could be wrong. You guys educate me. I don't know anything about this Jason Reza Giordani guy. I just know you've mentioned him a few times. I like Jordan Crowder. He and I get along great. We have disagreements, but that doesn't mean you can't come sit at the table. We disagree on a few things, but on some spiritual stuff, we're pretty much right on point. So the Atlantis narrative pulls out some weird stuff. People use it for ancient alien stuff. Here's History Channel promoting Atlantis, ancient aliens crap, trying to unify the two. It's like Randall Carlson unifying Younger Dryas and Atlantis, and it's so tenuous. It's just so tenuous. Here's our hero, Joe Rogan. I wonder if he works for the WEF because he made a bunch of people eat bugs. Let's see. Let's see. What if you lived in the lost civilization of Atlantis? Here's some crap. Yeah. Well, the thumbnail tells me it's crap because I'm looking at a futuristic city and I'm looking at some type of hybrid alien human clone type deal. So maybe that's just the thumbnail. I don't know. But people use Atlantis to push their own narratives, to push all their own stuff. Graham Hancock is all over the field. Yeah, this is a Reichak. This is the Reichak or Rishak, however you say it. It's not Jimmy Corsetti's discovery, but he passes it off. He talks about it and passes it off and wants you to believe that he's the one that discovered all this. This was discovered way before Jimmy Corsetti. As a matter of fact, the original discoverers who flew over it went back on land, on foot, surveyed the site, and instantly dismissed it when they saw what it was. It's a geological form. It's a bunch of collapsed salt domes. When those were formed, that area was underwater. It's nothing to do with Atlantis. It's so dumb. It's about one of the few things Randall Carlson and I agree on concerning Atlantis. It's not Atlantis. Here's Graham Hancock exploring the legend of Atlantis. I'm showing these because most people don't have an idea. They don't have a clue just how prolific this misinformation is. It is literally pushed and financed and protected. Yeah, that's what tells you something's wrong here. Why are they pushing this so hard? Why are they protecting it so hard? Let's see. Yeah, man, we got a bunch of these. So Mr. Corsetti right there, he's smiling, so he must have just told a lie. Oh, there he is. I don't know about this guy. Side projects. Incredible Lost Cities of Myth. I don't know. Maybe that's good. The one above it is the thumbnail actually shows the concept map of Athanasius Kircher, which is fake. So, yeah, I'm not impressed with that thumbnail. Catastrophes and why they matter. Look at these two good old boys. They're doing everything but wear the aprons right here. Catastrophes and why they matter. Why would a geologist, why would two men trained in uniformitarian thinking even want to talk about catastrophes unless they were trying to muddy the waters? Here's Randall Carlson again, going off. Loves to talk. This is embarrassing here. This is embarrassing here that, I mean, why would, I mean, we already know that this guy right here, the child catcher from 2012 Olympics, he's so unimportant and so just not relevant. I always forget his name. You guys always have to tell me this guy's name. Russell Brand, always showing off that 33 on his wrist. This guy, Russell Brand, signed a contract. He's playing the Christian role like Candace Owens, like so many others, like our vice president, pushing Christianity super hard because it's exactly what I predicted 5 years ago. There's going to be a huge pendulum swing from the liberal controlled government and society to the conservative right. And it's going to be, I even said this, it's going to be equally retarded and ridiculous what we see. Nobody believed me, but sure as hell happened. Yeah, he's one of the major players. Here's Graham Hancock. So I wonder if they're just different tools from the same toolbox. Here's Matt LaCroix again. He's linking ancient Atlantis site. Finally exposed. Looks like this AI lion here, Sphinx. I don't know, man. I don't know. Matt LaCroix, he's pretty much fallen. Here's Randall Carlson and Matt LaCroix. I think what happened was Matthew LaCroix, or however you say it, I think Matthew LaCroix was the one being groomed, and they just realized, damn, man, you got wrapped up with Billy Carson, and Archaix has completely dismantled the whole Billy Carson, Shar, and Zechariah Sitchin paradigm, and you got caught up in that. So we really can't, you're not a good face for the new, for continuing Graham Hancock's legacy. You do know the Younger Dryas material, the impact theory, you got the Atlantis stuff down, but your ancient alien stuff is not what we're looking for. So enter in Jimmy Corsetti. They start grooming Jimmy Corsetti. Something about Corsetti isn't adding up. So they're now grooming this new guy, Michael Button. I'm going to introduce you to him in a minute. Yeah. Here's old Matt going off again. We need a song about Matt talking about Atlantis all day long. Matt LaCroix, over and over. He's boring to me. I'm going to keep going. All these, I'm just trying to show you it's prolific, the amount of Atlantis materials out there and how many different, here's Julian Dorey. I've heard his name before. I don't know anything about him, but he's sitting here interviewing Matt LaCroix over ancient pyramids, Vatican secrets, and UFOs, Jimmy Corsetti's Atlantis theory, all this right here by Matt LaCroix. So there's crossover here between Matt LaCroix and Jimmy Corsetti. I don't know who John White is either. But yeah, man, Matt LaCroix, he seemed to have been getting a lot of traction. He doesn't seem like he's really going anywhere. I think they abandoned. I think whoever's controlling the narrative on Atlantis 9600 BC and trying to maintain Graham Hancock's crumbling legacy, I believe they have abandoned Jimmy Corsetti and Matt LaCroix as potential heirs to this publishing dynasty. Because what they're really trying to do is give Graham Hancock an exit strategy. What they didn't realize was Jason of Archaix was going to tear that shit apart. And it probably came to him as a complete surprise. So they're raising somebody, a standard bearer, who maybe hopefully Jason of Archaix will refocus his attention on this guy here and let Graham Hancock get out the door. But I'm going to introduce you to him. His name is Michael Button. Yeah, he's a little too silver-tongued for me. Here's another one, Greg Braden. You know, Big John and I invited Greg Braden months ago to the channel. We invited him for a friendly chat, the channel. So never heard from him. Just totally, just like David Icke, absolutely stonewalled. No response, no anything. That's okay. David Icke, Greg Braden, they're not the only ones. There's been a few that, and I'm cool with that. I don't need to talk to anybody, but that's what Greg Braden did. And I didn't know anything about him, really, I at all. So I kind of, when Big John gave me the list, he said, hey, man, here's all the people, man, that just being absolutely, they're not, we've got responses, they're cordial, now I'm good, or maybe in the future, or I'm busy right now, I can't schedule, whatever, all that's cool. But to outright completely ignore communications, I got that list from Big John. So David Icke is on that list. Greg Braden's on that list. There's a few others on that list too. But those are the two big ones on that list of just outright no responses. So I looked into Greg Braden. I started seeing all the Atlantis stuff. I started seeing ancient alien stuff. And I seen because priorly I thought he was like spiritual and some simulation theory stuff. I don't know why I thought that about him, but yeah. Anyway, yeah, he's real big in the woo-woo shit too. Pole shifts. He's into all that uniformitarian stuff. So you can't blame him. That's how he's educated. Can't blame him. But I'm not buying that BS. Here he is right here, Greg Braden. Oh, look at that. Almost 1 million subscribers. Congratulations, Greg. Probably not anybody in your subscription list I'd be interested in. Let's see. Antarctica's buried structures. Here's another one. Oh my God. Had no idea. You're another Rand Flimath. Rand Flimath's another shill. Not trying to hear none of that. Okay, so we went through that file. We go through a more interesting file now. So let me introduce you to Michael Button. Oh, he's a character. He's a character. So a year ago, this clown right here wasn't on anybody's radar 12 months ago. This guy right here with Graham Hancock wasn't on anybody's radar because he didn't even have a YouTube channel. Man, it's like a Matt LaCroix, Jimmy Corsetti cloning facility. This guy comes out of the field and he's got absolutely expensive, tailored, edited content on. It's like there's a whole agency putting his stuff together, graphics packages. He's got it. He's also very eloquent. He's also very young. He has a bachelor's in history, which really doesn't make him qualified for what he's doing, but still, it's okay. It's okay. This man, in less than a year on YouTube, in the 11th month on YouTube, goes on Joe Rogan. How did that happen? He is an absolute nobody. No one's ever heard of Michael Button. And then he just explodes across YouTube. I got a list of several channels I've told you all about. Some of them I still needed to inform you about that. It's crazy. It's like intelligence agencies are just churning out their next little marionette. Let me find. I'm sharing my screen. Okay, I'm still showing that picture. Let me show another one. So yeah, he goes, oh, there it is. No, that's not how you do it. How do I? Maybe I can't share it like that. I'm having a moment, guys. For some reason, I can't move. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's not it. So here he is. He's already on Joe Rogan in 11 months. And then Graham Hancock does a video with the man as well. That's why I know he's being groomed. Yeah, Graham Hancock's trying to create a bastion. Graham Hancock's people they're trying to create an insulator. And what they really wanted me to do, I know for a fact they wanted me to do this. They're trying to draw my attention to Michael Button. Yeah, he's a silver-tongued. Go listen to him. He's silver-tongued. He really is. I'm not impressed with him at all because, like I said, it's an unbreakable data set, and Michael Button is more than welcome to try to take apart that data set because I have no problem embarrassing him. But yeah, I see the play, and I'm trying to figure out why I can't. Oh, there we go. All right. So here he is. Michael Button's on Joe Rogan too. And I thought I had a picture of it. Oh, I do. It's in another file. We're going to get to that file in a minute. I do have one. But anyway, yeah, he just came out. He came out strong. I'm talking about super strong. So just like so many others we've seen in the past, everybody's got these stories. You already know Steven Spielberg got that fake ass story of how he came up in Hollywood. All these people got these fake ass stories. A lot of podcasters have fake ass stories of how they've overcome incredible odds, we're not trying to hear any of that. Yeah, these are made men. They're already made because of their connections, what they're doing, and whatever agendas they have attached their souls to. So yeah, I'm not buying none of this. None of this. I just like history. I got a bachelor's, and I'm trying to hear that. Just as nerdy as that weird ass kid they brought out after the Charlie Kirk affair. I'm Charlie Kirk's friend, and I just wanted y'all to introduce myself. It's just as weird. He too looks like these guys. Like they all came out the same cloning facility. That's terrible that Graham Hancock has to try to defend himself using proxies. So crazy. So okay, I'm done with this image. Yeah, this guy Michael Button, you ought to go check out his deal. See if I'm tripping. I'm not though. You don't get on YouTube and after 11 months you're already on Joe Rogan, and then all of a sudden Graham Hancock wants to look at you. Nah, you're already connected. You were connected before you got on YouTube, or you got on YouTube and somebody checked you out and then turn around and you sign that contract. There is no doubt in my mind. You tell me what you guys are thinking. But hey, I'm all for somebody coming up, but he's already been on Joe Rogan and he's already been with Graham Hancock, and his channel's taken off. In just 1 year, he's already got millions of views. So now he does a post this morning asking for money from his community. It's right here. So if any of you feel inclined to donate to him, by all means, there you go. Don't let me stop you. Don't let me stop you. But one thing you're going to get in Archaix is original research done by me. I'm going to cite my sources, and I'm going to give it to you to the best of my ability. I am never going to do what this guy here's doing. He's doing the same thing Graham Hancock admitted to doing, paying other people to do research. How do you trust it? How do you know they did it right? How do you know they cited the right bibliographic citations? How do you know they dotted the I's and crossed the T's? Man, I'm too neurotic. I can't trust another person's research. I got to do it myself. My Archaix team isn't even allowed to help me do my videos. No, they help me with all kinds of other things, merchandise, administrative stuff, helping with podcasting, communications, emails, all that stuff. But when it comes to doing these videos, I don't get any help. I'm not going to accept it. And he shouldn't either. I don't even understand that. Yeah, why would you? Look what it did to Graham Hancock. It got his bibliography full of the same ancient authors that all overturned the very thesis that his bibliography is attached to, because he used other researchers and he didn't do it himself. Absolutely embarrassing. Embarrassing. So, done with that. I'm going to share this next one. Let me open it first. That'll help. That's Michael Button. Y'all can go check him out. He's not even on my radar. I'm just letting you guys know, man. This is the type of shit we're dealing with. So how do they get away with all this? How is it possible that this deception can be perpetuated? I'm going to show you right here. Share my screen again. We got 2 more files. We got this file and one other file, and we're done. I know y'all can see that image. Some of these are going to be kind of blurry. So here's Greg Braden and Joe Rogan. I don't know what video it is. I don't even care. I'm just showing. This isn't about Greg Braden. It's about Joe Rogan. Here's Joe Rogan here with Graham Hancock and Dibble, the whatever that guy is. I think that's Jamie upside down, isn't it? That's somebody else. I don't know who that is upside down. Debate part 4. No evidence for Atlantis. Yeah, so Joe Rogan and here's Lex Friedman right here. Joe Rogan and Lex Friedman. It's pretty well connected little circle here. Every single individual here is attached to promoting the 9,600 year Atlantis narrative, despite all the evidence. Randall Carlson and Joe Rogan. The common denominator between them is this false Atlantis narrative. What is going on? Why is it so important for the public to think that the Younger Dryas impact period actually happened, that there was a disaster in the Ice Age? Why is it so important that you have to attach a historical story that's not even connected to it? Here's Andrew Schultz and Graham Hancock. You would think if Andrew Schultz or Lex Friedman or Joe Rogan were really interested in ratings, if they were really interested in volatile, explosive content that would just pull in a whole lot of people, you would think that they would love to get somebody on their show who would take apart all these guys' narratives and do it without even looking at a source. It would be amazing, but no. They want to maintain the status quo. It's a small club here. Andrew Schultz is in on it. Patrick Ben David, right here. Graham Hancock, he's another one. He's all for advocating the pseudo history of the Younger Dryas impact, which isn't, it's just a theory. It's not even a scientific fact. It's just theoretical. But Patrick Ben David is all cool with Graham Hancock coming on his show and having a complete inability to cite any sources for his theories. Just sit there and just freestyle. It's okay, Graham Hancock. Why? Because they're in the same club. Joe Rogan, what if Atlantis was real? Jimmy Corsetti's Lost City theory explained. There's Jimmy Upsetti and Joe Rogan going off 3 years ago. So Randall Carlson did impress me here. Eye of Sahara debunked. So him and Jimmy Corsetti are not getting along apparently at all. So, I mean, that's like I said, I could drink a beer with him. We're never going to agree about uniformitarianism. And we are never going to agree about an Atlantis being 9,600 years BC. And we're never going to agree that I can even entertain that he believes it. No, you can't believe it. You can't be that dumb. There's no way. No way. Here's Ben David. Here's Ben David and Hancock at the bottom too. And you know, Jimmy Corsetti just told a fib. He's sitting there grinning. There's our hero again, Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan again. These are all different videos. Joe Rogan and Graham Hancock again. It's not as simple. It's not as simple as just hearing a theory and moving on. There's a thousand theories. Why is it so important to keep bringing this into the public attention? Why is it so important to keep pushing this false narrative? Why? Graham Hancock. Aliens, Atlantis, and the apocalypse. They stick Atlantis on anything, on everything. There's Ben David again at the bottom. There's our hero, Andrew Schultz and Graham Hancock right there. Could Atlantis be real? Underneath it, Rand Flimath. Atlantis is in Antarctica with Graham Hancock and Ancient Apocalypse. Yeah, absolute total BS. Here is the concept piece. This is the one that J Dreamer shows too. It's the same map maker, Athanasius Kircher. It's just a concept piece. Atlantis isn't there. He just drew a map that was a concept piece, just like the North Pole map was a concept piece that all these YouTubers are taking as a fact. Oh, look at this map. Now that map's a concept piece, man. Just like Athanasius Kircher, Mundus Subterraneus was a concept piece showing the underworld. There's Joe Rogan, Randall Carlson, and Graham Hancock in the background. I don't know who this guy is, Michael something. There's Lix Friedman and Graham Hancock. Yeah, they're all in on it, guys. There's Joe Rogan, Graham Hancock, and Randall Carlson. Yeah, it's crazy. Proof Atlantis is real. Andrew Schultz is absolutely beside himself. He is totally amazed at the erudite wisdom and knowledge and the divine presence of Mr. Hancock. What ancient texts reveal about Atlantis. Here it is, right here. Yeah, man. This isn't something that's just of passing curiosity. This is agenda driven. There must be a reason why the establishment is gung-ho about making sure the public is dumbed down, stupefied into believing this farce. So that's another debate. I would love to have a Graham Hancock, Jimmy Corsetti, Michael Button, any of them. They're all saying that the biblical flood story is actually the Younger Dryas flood impact. It's also joined to Atlantis. They're trying to merge everything together, and it's not. You guys know I've got unbroken data sets for 2239 BC, the month of May, being the biblical flood, Chinese flood event. Yeah, I'd love to debate that too. Let's see. Graham Hancock reveals the true story of Atlantis. I seriously doubt that. Here he is with Ben David. Here Randall Carlson. Look, it's just over and over. They have done so many videos. I'm no longer seeing this as this is just for public consumption content, because it's interesting now, man. This is agenda driven. It's agenda driven. One last file. So after 22 centuries, the Plato narrative remained absolutely unchanged. Now, I left these people in a file of their own because they are not to be classified with Graham Hancock, Jimmy Corsetti, Matt LaCroix, Michael Button. They are not to be classified with Randall Carlson. They are not to be classified with Billy Carson at all. The reason is because none of these are really Atlantis researchers. They're not getting out there in public. Their content is not about Atlantis. Their content is about other topics, and Atlantis is ancillary. This is very different than Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson. Their focus is always on Atlantis and using the false dating of Atlantis to promote a bullshit theory. This is a totally different situation than what we find with Robert Seffer, we find with G.G. Young, and we find with Dark Journalist. I included them because all three of them are very popular. I have nothing against all three of them. But all three of them also have bought into, well, I don't want to say buy into. G.G. Young's bought into it. Dark Journalist has bought into it. But Robert Seffer is reporting things more from a professional standpoint, and he's really relaying facts that are conveyed by others. But in doing so, he's still promoting it. Doesn't matter if he believes or not. So I do not want to be misunderstood. I am not classifying G.G. Young, Dark Journalist, or Robert Seffer with the active deception. I am only classifying them as making a mistake in relying on others as an authority, and because they've already seen it. They're watching this video, and there's no doubt in my mind that they're going through and they see the data set and they realize, damn, man, the data set is badass. It's awesome. But I do want them to know equally, man, there is absolutely no ill feelings here at all. I'm pointing out they have very large communities, and those large communities need to know that, hey, from a spiritual standpoint, more power to you. But from a historical standpoint, you need to know that 100% of what you're conveying about Atlantis is all from the Theosophical Society. It is all from this woman here. I'm about to show it. Share screen. Probably need to. We're gonna look at a few first. We'll look at a few first. Here's a YouTube video right here. Secret of Atlantis, a Moravian royal bloodline. So it's just somebody using Atlantis for their own narrative. That's fine. So Internet Scholar thinks he found Atlantis. It is the absolute world of antiquity. I like this guy. He probably doesn't like me, but I don't give a damn. But World of Antiquity, he did a critique of Jimmy Corsetti's Rorschach structure or whatever. It is the worst Atlantis theory ever. I agree with him. So much kudos to you, World of Antiquity. Now, the Anunnaki in Atlantis, this guy's terrible. Billy Carson has taken a fall. You know what? Did it to himself. You guys already know my story. When he had 20 different groups on YouTube, I used to send him information, and he used to block me from group after group after group after group because I was correcting his Anunnaki stuff. But he could have took my research like everybody else has. I was freely giving it. Here, man, here's the shark count system. Here's the day count system. Now, man, here's the Vedic system, overlaid the Mayan and overlaid the Sumerian. Look, it's all the same calendar, man. He says your Anunnaki data is good, but man, they're not coming from space. They're coming from the underground, bro. And they're not just coming from the underground, but all the myths say that all the gods came down from mountains. The Watchers came from Mount Artis. They didn't come from space, bro. Nowhere in Sumerian are there drop ships, carrier frigates, medical frigates. There are no fighters coming from the sky. None of that. They all came from the underworld after a cataclysm. And then they built fleets of ship in their torn homeland, and they found better pastures. And this is the beginning of all ancient mythological systems. The arrival, the arrival of Enki, the arrival of Cecrops, the arrival of Oannes, all these civilization, Viracocha, Votan, Bokika, Quetzalcoatl, the arrival of the bearded civilization bearers. They all came on fleets of ship, but they ultimately came out of a divine mountain. Mountain was the entrance to an underworld facility. So he blocked me from everything. Finally, I created my own Facebook group called Archaix. And man, I started putting all my research on there, and people started paying attention. But yeah, that's our history. I figured, man, shoot, one ex-con to another, ought to be able to get his attention. Nope, that man blocked me everywhere. Edgar Cayce on Atlantis. Lemuria and Atlantis. Atlantis Resort looks good. So here's Dark Journalist right here. He's got some pretty good content, but I'm not really into the occult, into mysticism, all that. He's got a loyal following. He's a very intelligent guy. I would say less than 10% of his material has anything to do with Atlantis. So most of his material is basically on the occult and on mysticism and on he kind of goes into government agencies and all that. I'm not going to claim to be an expert on Dark Journalist. Like I said, I could probably drink a bourbon with him, but I don't know much about him. But I do know that I've gone through his Atlantis videos, and he has borrowed heavily from Helena Blavatsky, Edgar Cayce, Rudolf Steiner, and the M. Besant scenarios, the Rosicrucian writings concerning Atlantis. So it's he networks a lot and does podcasts with this beautiful woman here. This is Gigi Young. Many of you know her. And like I said, I'm not trying to insult anybody. Gigi Young has material about Atlantis, but she doesn't focus on it. Robert Seffer is in the same boat. It's like 99.5% of Robert Seffer's material is other historical topics for which there's very little crossover between Archaix and Robert Seffer's material. But that 0.5% on Atlantis is totally wrong. But then again, he's not really promoting it as his beliefs. He's reporting it in like journalistic style, kind of keeping an insulation between him and the material he's producing. He actually cites Edgar Cayce. He cites Rudolf Steiner. He cites Theosophical Society, Helena Blavatsky, and all that. So Gigi Young and Dark Journalist have worked together. And there they are right there. They have worked together. And I would promote both of them. You can go to Gigi Young's channel. You can go to Dark Journalist channel. They're very entertaining. They're very informative. You guys know I am a historical chronological data guy. I'm just not really into that type of material. But I know people who absolutely adore both of them, and they're a part of their communities. And I'm all for that. Both of them have really good material. But when it comes to the Atlantis material, both Dark Journalist and Gigi Young are not conveying the Platonic version that remained unchanged for 23 centuries. They are conveying the Helena Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner, and Besant, Rosicrucian, Theosophical Society, and Order of the Golden Dawn versions of Atlantis and Edgar Cayce. So I don't know what his background is. I do know that Dark Journalist, one thing that you could absolutely, you know what you're getting with Dark Journalist. He's a well-dressed guy, and he is always going to look sharp. And that's impressive to me, because you guys know I'm a t-shirt guy. I'm just not going to get dressed up for anybody, unless I'm in Vegas. But all his videos, he presents himself very well. You can say the same thing for Gigi Young, but that's not as impressive about Gigi Young. I'm more impressed with a guy who would take the time to do all that, because Gigi Young she comes from a fashion background. She was a model. This is her thing. So it comes probably pretty easy for her. But Dark Journalist and Gigi Young, like I said, I'm not hating on them. I'm just showing you the only reasons they're on this list is because the Atlantis that they're promoting is the occult mystic versions that appeared in the 1800s. And this guy here, oh my God. Listen, it does not matter if Billy Carson is doing a Stonehenge video, he's going to fit Atlantis into it. If he's doing a video on the mound builder civilization in North America, he's going to fit Atlantis in it. If he's even talking about Thoth, he's always going to throw it in that Thoth the Atlantean, when Thoth the Atlantean is a 1920s invention by an author named Dorial, who wrote the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. So Billy Carson's added to it, thinking that because there is an actual hermetic illustration that shows the Emerald Tablet, and it's just a single black and white little illustration of the Emerald Tablet, and it doesn't have any of the data that the Doriel version that Billy Carson treats as history has. It's really embarrassing. He's done it to himself. I'd called this man out to debate so many times. Remember the rant he did about not debating? I'm not debating that guy. Remember, he did everything in the world but say my name and say Archaix. Yeah, we had a good laugh and a drink over that one. So yeah, Billy Carson, remember what he told me? Remember what he said in the video aimed at me one time? It was why are you going to believe him about Egypt? Why are you going to believe him about the Great Pyramid? I've been to Egypt. I've been to the Great Pyramid. If you ain't been there, you don't know anything about it. Yeah, man. Yeah, I triggered the shit out of that dude. Let's see here. A sharp is a day, not a year. I love that video. Billy Carson. So yeah, Billy Carson. Here's Jay Dreamers, Jason Tice. You guys know me and him. We have this history. You know I can't stand him. Anytime I mention him, I'm always going to mention Brian and Mia, because Brian and Mia both came up dead. I don't know how that happened. I don't know who's involved in it, but I have seen the coroner reports, and Brian and Mia came up dead. The dog came up dead, and one of the main trolls that was in Brian and Mia's chat all the time was Jason Tice. And after Brian and Mia came up dead, all of a sudden, Jason Tice has all of Brian and Mia's research on the EMCO event. So the EMCO event is the electromagnetic plasma changeover event. So they couldn't stand Jason Tice, and they even did videos about him stealing their content. And they even claimed he was CIA. They were going off on him in this video. So as a matter of fact, that video is still on YouTube. It's on Mia's Glass Slippers channel. And they're going off on Jason Tice. They end up dead. They can't defend the integrity of their channels and research no more. So Jason Tice, aka known as J Dreamer, starts the J Dreamers channel and just starts repackaging the EMCO event as the plasma apocalypse, and literally just took all their shit. Yeah, man. Sad day. There he is again. So there we got Ben Shapiro, Lix Friedman, Eric Weinstein. What? Is that like what are they doing? Having a bar mitzvah? With Joe Rogan? Who is this? Michael Malice? I don't know what that is. But yeah, I'm showing these pictures because you can see over and over and over that who the gatekeepers are. The gatekeepers are the ones who invite people to their platforms to educate the public on certain issues. But it's really obvious now that there is a huge agenda not to educate the public on Archaix principles. So here's Robert Sefer. Am I saying that right? Is it Sefer or Sefer? Sefer or Sefer? I'm not really sure. So anyway, he's got professional grade material. He is an anthropologist. He does short and long form content. So here is Atlantis, Inner Earth, Ancient Occult Mysteries. Yeah, see, he and I have read some of the same books. I have the Shaver Mysteries, Hollow Earth Theory books. But I'm just not, I don't never really promote that stuff. I never really talk about it. And he's not necessarily promoting it, but he is talking about, he is doing videos about all these occult and mystic concepts and strange, all the strange theories. But here's the fall of Atlantis. Esoteric secrets of Atlantis, Atlantis, fallen angels, archaic DNA, forgotten dreams of Atlantis, Robert Seifer, Atlantis right here, the legend of Beowulf. Oh man, I might need to listen to that. Most of you don't know it's the Anglo-Saxon poem concerning the Geats that went to help King Hrothgar of the Danes. Only one copy survived all the church purgings. We have one copy of Beowulf survived. That's why we have a copy today. All right. Let's see. This is Robert Seifer, Mystery Religion of Atlantis. That's what I should have said. He covers the mystery religions and the occult a lot in his deal. So here's Edgar Casey in Atlantis. He's reporting what Edgar Casey said. So anyway, like I said before, here's more Robert Seifer, History of Atlantis and the Lost Tribes, when the Atlantean Empire attacked, legendary Atlantis. He has fallen for. But Robert Seifer's not a chronologist. He is an anthropologist. These are entirely different schools of thought with entirely different source materials, entirely different bodies of literature. So, Archaix is all about a multidisciplinary approach to history. So anthropology is a much tighter window. But the problem is that an anthropologist is never in their lifetime ever going to read all the specialist material that is published in their own school of thought. It's just too much stuff. So, Robert Seifer has Atlantis and the Inner Earth. Here is Thule, Hyperborea, Atlantis, the ancient antediluvian bloodlines. So yeah, he goes, I believe he goes with the 9,060. He's the same as the Graham Hancock version, I believe Seifer goes with. But then again, I'm going to differentiate, like I said earlier, I stopped sharing. I need to share some more. Because it's not, what G.G. Young and Dark Journalists and Robert Seifer are doing is not even comparable. It's not even the same class and category as Jimmy Corsetti and there it is. Got me a window now. Yeah, I don't see them as actively deceiving. They're literally conveying their beliefs or the things that they have accepted to be true as portrayed by others, or what they personally believe to be true because they believe the source materials. That is totally different than what's going on with Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, Jimmy Corsetti, Matt LaCroix, Billy Carson. These guys are active deceivers because they have the correct information. They're absolutely ignoring it completely. The woman that started it all, Helena Blavatsky, Isis Unveiled. Also, I have another book of hers. Yeah, I got it in here. I'm not going to be able to find it with all these books. Yeah, I've got The Secret Doctrine. All right, so we've got her. How do I get to the next one? There it is. So I've got this picture of her as well. I have this book, The Secret Doctrine, except mine's from I don't have this one. Mine's a hardback. It's old, from 1888. All right. So we're going to share this one real quick. We're going to share this window. Oh, I have pictures of it for you right here. Oh, I'm not done. So here's my secret doctrine. This is the secret doctrine I've got. So I'm wondering, I mean, from the sources I found, it looks like Helena Blavatsky was Jewish. I'm not sure. But the secret doctrine does have this sigil on the front. The secret doctrine right here, mine is from 1888. No, it was originally, the original edition is 1888. Mine's from 1925. I have both volumes, 1 and 2. Pretty big. It's a pretty big book. Small print. Secret Doctrine. Helena Blavatsky. So let's continue on here. Let's look at this. So we got, what is this? Oh, Ben Gurion, University of Negev, right here. And I can't remember what the hell. This is concerning Rudolf Steiner, and I can't remember where. I guess I cropped it too much. Yeah, I cropped it too much. I had Rudolf Steiner on the top. But yeah, Ben Gurion, University of Negev had a whole course on Steiner studies. Here's Helena Blavatsky, a Jewish esoteric school, right here. So, I mean, this is the common denominator. I don't know why they're all fixated. I don't know why the Jewish version of history wants to put Atlantis at the Younger Dryas. We just saw the full data set. The full data set shows that it's 13th century BC, around 1200 BC. So it's not the Younger Dryas, but why it's there for some reason it is in the Jewish chronology that Atlantis is supposed to be in the Ice Age. I don't know why. I'm not making that assessment just because Helena Blavatsky or Rudolf Steiner. I'm not, yeah. And I understand the arguments. Believe me, you're not going to miss me. I understand the arguments that, hold on, Jason, Helena Blavatsky's material was used by the Nazis to do this, and say, oh yeah, that's the program. That's exactly what's happening today. Anti-Semitism is on the rise today because they're employing the exact same technique. So I'll miss me with that. Rudolf Steiner as well. Rudolf Steiner was openly anti-Semitic. But every bit of that's a part of the program. The best way to conceal your identity is to pretend that you hate the very people you're related to. Yeah, and I'm not buying that shit. Remember, guys, I'm done thinking that the richest and most influential people in the world are victims. I'm done thinking that. Now, if you run the entire sports industry, the whole banking dynasties, all of Hollywood, yeah, man, all the publishing companies, yeah, and you've got all the biggest platforms: Joe Rogan, Andrew Schultz, Patrick Ben David, Lex Friedman. Yeah, man, I'm not making any of this up. I'm telling you the facts. So the facts are, for some reason, there is a Jewish program that's active right now that is really, really bent on everybody believing that Atlantis is 9,600 BC. I don't know why. Rudolf Steiner and his Jewish milieu. It's everywhere, guys. It's everywhere. So let's see. Out of there. Out of that. Get out of that. Get out of that. 3 hours and 6 minutes. 3 hours and 7 minutes exactly. My friends and lovers of information. My entire diatribe and all my evidence, that I've brought forth is over. I'm done. This video is done. I hope I haven't offended, too many people. There are some of you I don't give a damn about offending. But yeah, I'm not trying to offend Gigi Young. She's a sweetheart. I'm not trying to offend dark journalists. I'm not trying to offend Robert Seffer. But they are very popular and their communities are very large. And a lot of people listen to them. But the Atlantis that they convey is not the Atlantis of 23 centuries before all of that material was invented. That's all. That's my point with them. The rest of them, yeah, we got problems. And if anybody watching this video has any problem whatsoever with the information that I've conveyed in here and you think you're qualified, I'm ready to debate this shit. I'm ready to debate this shit because I might have got a few books put to the side. Love you guys. You're going to hear that intro all over again. All over again. And I will see you later. I got a whole bunch of emails I've got to answer, and I've got fundamental changes in Archaix Underground, our platform, that I've got to get to because my admins and I did a 3-hour video yesterday, and we nailed out all the new spaces, the spaces we have to eliminate, and Archaix Underground is about to explode. Love you guys, but it's bourbon time. According to Plato, primarily in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Atlantis was a powerful island civilization located beyond the Pillars of Hercules. This is the modern-day Strait of Gibraltar. It divides the Mediterranean from the Atlantic. The Atlanteans were descendants of Poseidon and initially were a virtuous society governed by wise rulers who followed divine principles. Over time, the Atlanteans became increasingly materialistic and morally corrupt. They developed significant military power and began expanding their territory through conquest. They launched a massive military campaign against Athens and other Mediterranean civilizations. Athens at the time was a noble and disciplined society. Despite being significantly smaller than Atlantis, the Athenians mounted a heroic defense. Plato portrays the Athenians as a virtuous, disciplined society that successfully repelled the Atlantean invasion. Shortly after this conflict, according to Plato's account, both Atlantis and Athens were struck by a catastrophic natural disaster. Atlantis was said to have been swallowed by the ocean in a single day and night, completely disappearing beneath the waves. This presentation will show, using data from the books you see here, that the Atlantis narrative preserves true historical events. There are 30 chronological points in the story that date the Atlantean War and destruction. The true date of Atlantis narrative was known 2,000 years ago. Popular authors and platforms are networked together in an effort to keep you from knowing the truth about this destruction date. True Atlantis researchers are suppressed and unmentioned by this network. The bibliographies of these deceitful authors prove they have read the books and know the true data, but they cherry-pick what they inform the public. The Platonic Atlantis narrative remained unchanged for 2,200 years until a massive amount of invented material was introduced into the Atlantis story by mystics in the 1800s. After 4 years of email and public requests for these men to defend their research and public claims about Atlantis, no one has wanted to put their claims up to public scrutiny in an archaics debate. Every one of them have been made aware of the callouts by many different species of communication. In this presentation, I will show who they are and who protects them. Welcome to the unbreakable data set that completely ends the debate over Atlantis dating. Every one of these men shown in this presentation are welcome to either debate the matter or offer their public critiques, for which I will give answer. I have said many times, in 2025, we are in a paradigm war, and in the matter of Atlantis, archaics has won by default.